Okay, we're going to start this up now. I'm not planning to run 8 hours or anything, but this was kind of just something a couple of us were talking this morning that we wanted to just talk about a couple of things. We might change the title, I don't know, but we got to talking about the tree thing again. If you don't know what that is, I'm not quite sure how you would know, but it's about there are no forests on flat Earth was the original with the Russian language, or not Russian language, but the Russian accent person, and then people did remakes and analysis of it, and so we were starting to talk about multiple issues with that. And so I think if I were to just summarize what mine and then some of the other people here on the panel's opinion of it is that the first red flag was that it caught on like wildfire, and the second was that people are treating it almost like a spiritual experience, even greater than just believing the earth is flat, that it was more profound and more enlightening, and that this explains everything when, as I said in the little video I made about it, I don't think it explains anything, and in fact could be just another, as I put it, a laser light for the cats to chase. And so we're all going to talk about that, and on the panel today we have Brian, and I'm going to try to say it, Cathexis, and Pillbox, and possibly also Victoria. Welcome to all you guys. You can unmute your mics.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You got it.
We're glad to have you guys. Thanks for coming. It's always really boring when it's just me.
Oh, never.
So,
but yeah, about the whole tree thing. I mean, we talked about it already a little bit, but yesterday Nathan Oakley had brought up that point about the roots, and that's the main thing that I'm looking as if it could be verified in any way. I think that would probably be the only way. And,
to dig down and look for the roots of the tree.
Or have some, geological, equipment that you're able to ping it, or I'm quite sure it's possible. So that would probably be the first place I'd go looking before I would accept it as truth. But as you mentioned, it's being accepted as revelation almost.
Yeah, that's kind of concerning to me, that how quick everybody just said, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we can all stop now because this is, going to explain our whole existence. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute.
Well, I mean, it's a really cool idea. It is. It's very imaginative, and it had me thinking, and it does feel paradigm shifting. Like, I can understand that, where if that were to be true, then all of these other X's and Y's would become true, So I think people play into that mentally, emotionally, whatever, and kind of create their own, profundity out of it, I suppose. But if it's true or not, that's still yet to be understood. So I'm right there with you.
Right. That's the thing, is there's not enough questions being asked before people said it was eye-opening and all that sort of thing. It's a nifty idea, to be sure, like you said, but the problem with nifty ideas is we tend to drop our normal skepticism, and I've compared it to how people just for 2,000 years have been attacking the Bible, but in spite of archaeology and papers and all sorts of things, but you show them a mountain that looks like a tree, and they're like, oh, that's it, that's true, I believe it. Where's the skepticism? I just don't see it happening.
Behind it. Yes. Too many feet first, head first, too fast.
Yeah, Curtis pointed out in the chat there that a lot of these sites are in national parks, which won't allow something. He didn't get to finish his sentence, I guess, but yeah, you might have to wonder sometimes which places were decided to be national parks and which weren't, and why they wouldn't let the people who own the national parks, being the American taxpayers, even go there. I can understand not wanting to ruin the environment and all that, and there are a lot of people who would do that sort of thing, but still, anybody with I don't want to say supervision, but vetting of some sort to go in and say, let me at least take some pictures. How can that hurt anything? Or fly over it. Charter an airplane and fly over it, or take some readings. Do some scientific investigation
Yeah.
and let us know what the results were. I don't see the problem with that.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot to be determined, and as for where it came out of left field from and why and when, you know what I mean? Like, this is all still to be determined, because it's definitely pushing the community into a particular, just the people who understand that the Earth may be quite different than what they're told, or the universe may
right.
be quite different. These are the folks that it seems to be targeted at, hence the title and the name,
Right.
On the Flat Earth. Now, so, I do look at that and I'm like, okay, well, why is it being pushed by X people, and who, and who's saying the same rhetoric over and over, and I don't know. It's something to be concerned about in my view. Like, it's just needs to be observed. Like, people should step back and ask themselves why, when, what for, I suppose.
Right. It just seemed that this was as if somebody's been studying the movement and going, you know what, if we drop this idea, they would just chase it like dogs
Yeah.
after a bone.
Yeah. And let's say it's not real
when you
in
get the
any
right
way, shape,
people
or
that have
form.
the influence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's say it's not real in any way, shape, or form, and it's completely ludicrous, and there's proof of it with, like, let's say it's just 100% fiction. Well, then now what you've done is you've associated this idea with this idea, and now people
Exactly.
will, it further puts you down into this pseudoscientist hole that we're already in the sense of, well, I think the Earth might be flat. You're already in that category, and now they're just kind of piling it on, if it be the case. You know
Right.
what I mean?
And like we were all saying, it doesn't mean we don't think this is intriguing, but to just jump in with both feet like that by so many people all of a sudden is really got the red flags up for me.
Yeah.
Well, the bad thing about all this is you have certain people that, okay, I agree with what they're doing is by saying, if they come out and say, hey, I watched this, I don't agree with it, but then you got some people pushing it on their own YouTube thing,
Right.
but yet they're pushing the same video and then asking you what about it. In a way, they're pushing the same idea, and that's why I kind of got irritated with it, because I'm like, these people that I thought were intelligent in all this. I'm not saying all of them that are. I'm just saying some of them that I thought were intelligent for doing this, even pushing it, or even trying to. When you question, you do the research, and you do a lot of other stuff before you even put anything out there. So these people put an idea out there and just ran with it without even looking at any evidence or anything like that. It was just so messed up. Me and Pillbox were on here like, oh my God, really? Are you serious? Right. And it just,
And what bothers me
just
too is
baffles me.
is that people they've abandoned any kind of method of determining what's true and what's false as an overreaction to finding out we've been lied to about so many things. So now nothing is knowable. And so what if they did want to investigate this tree thing? How would they do it? What have they decided ahead of time is going to tell them true or false about this, or do they just want to believe? And that's the thing I think we really need to have answered.
Yeah, this process of asking yourself about the shape of the Earth, it either reshapens your discernment, or you're right, it totally abandons it for the believer type person.
Right.
Somebody who doesn't know much, doesn't research much, and just likes personality or whatever. I mean, that's a factor. We have to acknowledge that human beings are like that. So with this is going to be, if this is a false idea being injected in here to make things look ridiculous, or more so in their mind, then it would be those people that they're targeting, because the people with discernment are kind of stepping back and saying, wait, what's this all about, really?
Right, and like I said, if they want to find out what's true about the past or what's true about, the situation we're in right now, how are they going to figure it out? How are they going to determine that? Because if they go into it just, this feels right, this feels wrong, and that could change with what you ate for breakfast, it just could be, you just ping around from one idea to the next, and It's like a bee going from one flower to the next. It's like, well, I like this, I'm going to take it from there. And to some extent, I can see, that's what discernment is. It's kind of a picking and choosing, but it's doing so with some kind of standard that is objective. It doesn't depend on your feelings today, And how are they going to do that? It's like if we look for roots, because every tree has a root structure that's very similar to what you see above ground. And does that exist? Does anybody care? Where's the debris on the surface? Where's evidence that big logs were hauled away? Nobody's asking those questions, and that's disturbing.
Yeah, it's just an interesting thing. I mean, it can be chalked up as a psychological experiment. I mean, because that's the way that from my research, that's the way that agencies operate when it comes to disinformation. Like, 80% truth and 20% garbage in order to muddy the waters, in order to confuse it, a certain amount. So, it looks to me that if we're talking in that like kind of conspiratorial, like psyop, context, people are naive if they think that agencies haven't looked into this particular side of the internet. Like, they really have to be. If it is that what flat earthers are saying is absolutely true, then they have every reason to try to get in front of information, to try to alter, to put disinfo out, to, you know what I mean? Like, all these, and this is why everybody, I think, is so, everybody's afraid of shills and agents and all. It's because we know it at a certain part of us, like, wait a second, this is a dangerous idea if it be true fully. So I think that kind of plays into that. I think people with discernment are kind of stepping back going, wait a second, this does seem a little bit, I don't know.
Whether it is or not, the point being that we have to at least ask the question. And you brought up about the shield card. I was thinking about this morning, that it's the new race card. In conspiracy land, all you have to do is call somebody a shill or suspect that they're a shill, and then you run around all over the internet telling everybody you are a shill.
Yeah, the word shill is the psyop. They put that out in 2012. Before 2012, that word was never used very much, like not in the way that it is now. You know what I mean? Like, so it's that easy. It's that easy to manipulate large masses of people.
Yeah, there's always a handle. There's always a catchphrase or something.
Yeah, and these folks, if you're like, the conspiracy theory realm is you're going to find a lot of BS, but you're also going to find a lot of truth about people in power, institutions, military-industrial complex. So I mean, technically, this realm is dealing with dangerous ideas. You'd be naive to say it isn't. So I definitely think they have this covered, so to speak. There are people looking into this side of the internet, and they have been for 20, 30 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I don't know. It's just frustrating looking back on it because, like you said, the word shill itself is a psyop,
Yeah, and even if it turns out to be an accurate theory, and we won't know, once again, until we have some kind of way of determining that, but even if it turns out to be so, I think the interest that the powers that be have in it is how they can make us react to it. And I think this bandwagon thing that we just saw is a good indication of that. How quick people are to just take it and run.
And to see how it plays out over the next couple of weeks. Like, it's really interesting.
Put something out there that's full of bull, and then to do that,
Yeah, and that's why I always say, just me personally, that there is no movement. These are individuals on a path to understand their paradigm and possibly change it with new information. If you're involved with a group, well, every group can be infiltrated. Every single one of them. Don't associate. Don't put a title on you. Don't call yourself, an or an ist. Like, just be an individual on a path to learn what is true or not. And I think people get caught up in the whole social aspect of all this YouTube and it's just frustrating to see people taking this shit way too seriously. I mean, on that social level.
And themselves too seriously, yeah.
Exactly. Ego is everywhere. So I try to stay out of all that, and I'm just like, look, I'm not a part of movement. This isn't a movement. There's a guy on, I think his name's Tubal Cain, anyways, I can't remember who says it, but he says, it's Jazz Sinclair. He says, this isn't a movement. They're the ones that are moving. We're not moving. We know we're stationary.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, then that's the thing. As soon as you get a hierarchy or a pecking order, all they have to do to steer the whole thing is get the people at the top, and
Well,
that's
the
what's
problem is
dangerous
that
about it.
this is a perfect example of the fact that this is a spiritual warfare. The reason I know that is because in the past 48 hours, I've been listening to obviously a handful of people, probably the more popular, respected, I guess, so-called flat earthers around here, gathering up and having, roundtables about this. Most of which took the bait and completely just gave into their emotions and their feelings and told us how special they felt and how it really drew them in, and it was so this, and they were really promoting this as if it was like, wow, they just gave you a back massage, like this was such an amazing, profound thing that it just made, and they literally were saying it, this makes me feel so good. Well, you know what? Just because something feels good certainly does not mean it is correct. And this is
Right.
something you learn when you're a child. So can we grow up a little bit? It doesn't always work that way. It's not always good just because it looks and smells and I mean, I don't know what to tell you guys, but this is a spiritual warfare. This is people being distracted. And the crazy thing in here is that you can go up and down sideways on this issue. Let's say that a lot of it's true. Every single one of these people that's talked about it, and they're not Christians, and I'm not beating up on you guys if you're not a Christian, but then all you're doing is relating to Christian doctrine. This is what the Bible talked about for literally thousands of years now. Giant people, yeah, you called us crazy. Yeah, giant animals, yeah, you told us that they were fake also. Giant trees, it says there's a tree that can be seen from the four corners of the earth. So again, if any of this is true, all it's going to do is validate the Bible. So thanks for catching up with Christian doctrine, but it's been here for a long time, and people are acting like this is a new concept. The problem is you're taking a little bit of truth. There's a difference between a 20-foot giant. If anybody on the panel right now saw a 20-foot tall human being in front of their house, it would be the most frightening thing you've ever seen in your life. Period. Let alone something much bigger. You don't have to
50
be
miles.
Tall. Right. You don't have to be but 7 feet tall nowadays to be called a giant. If you're 7 feet, and there's some average person's what 5'6". If you're 8 feet tall, 9 feet tall, we're getting into a number that would be shockingly frightening if people were that big. That's what a giant is. What they're doing is they're perverting the truth that these things were real. We do have accounts. We have historical facts and records from cultures all over the world for thousands of years as well, besides the Bible. The problem is they're stretching it at such a length, such an extreme, I get it's like an abomination. It's a perverse thing. They're stretching it so far as, oh, look, it was so big. It's so much bigger than we could have ever thought anything was. Oh, my God, I feel so enlightened now because nobody knew it. And now I get to tell my friends. And they feel great about that because something like this is so ridiculous, and the fact that they think they're seeing evidence for it makes them feel so special. And now, obviously, they're enlightened and they figured out something that you didn't, and now they feel proud about it. And now here we are, we're talking about these people claiming these things, and every single one of them, including on the panel on David Weiss's show, pretty much all went back to the stories of history in the Bible, which has nothing to do with tree stumps being the size of the Devil's Tower.
Right.
Nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
So the perversion. So you're taking truth. This is what, and Jesus warned of us this, just like the Catholic Church is an absolute perversion of Christianity. It's not Christian. It is anti-Christ. And that's exactly what they're doing in every single field. First, it's, we have the concave. That's exactly what the concave earth was, guys. And you know what? I looked into it too at first. The concave is to distract you from your reality. It's just like the ball earth, except it's a new scam because they didn't need they didn't have to push it onto us until people were waking up to the fact that we're in a flat stationary plane of existence. So these things are always going to come up, and this is not going to be the last one. This is one of many things as roadblocks and literal stumps that are going to get in your way to slow you down.
Right. Was somebody talking, or that was just background noise?
I think
my phone rang.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. But yeah, the whole thing, what I see happening over and over again, no matter which step we are in the way in all this, is that the people will take two things at the same time that don't make any sense. They'll say, the Bible is crap. It's been, changed, even though they have no way of knowing whether it's been changed. No idea how to prove that. But they'll, put it down, put it down, put it down. All the while, taking one thing after another from it. Now, there would be others that say, the Bible got it from someplace else, but it isn't the Bible that's being put down all this time. It isn't the ancient other religions. It's not ancient Babylonian teachings. It's not the ancient Phoenicians. It's the Bible. Every time, that's the one they keep putting down and keep taking stuff from. So I think, the fact of the opposition to the Bible at the same time agreeing with it is kind of telling, in my opinion. That I'm seeing a pattern here.
Right, the Bible and Christians have been talking about this for literally hundreds of years. Just because, I became a Christian recently doesn't mean there have been Christians for hundreds of years that actually believe the Christian doctrine, which most, it seems, westernized Christians don't believe in themselves. And trust me, I have many more problems with people proclaiming they're Christians than non-Christians. I often get along a lot better without the Christians because there's so many fakes. But the fact of the matter is, if you're going to take this, great. Yeah, it's called biblical doctrine. It's been around for thousands of years. Stop trying to credit somebody else. But what you're doing, though, is you're not giving any credit. You're giving yourself credit. You're now loving look what I came up with. Oh, this is so great. It made me feel so good. Yeah, you're going too far. We do have a general idea of what's going on here. Everybody should have a general idea once you wake up to flat earth that, yeah, you've been lied to about everything. And guess what? Every single time it's against the Bible. It's anti-Bible. The Bible was the original flat earth book. You were anti-flat earth. You were anti-Bible already.
Right.
Well, the Bible's proven itself over and over again. The Bible already spoke about giants. We already knew this. We had cultures. We have Native Americans, speaking of these people, all over the world. How many 7 different, cultures discovered North America. We don't even know our literal 100 years ago. You're past 100 years ago. Every single one of us has no idea what the world was like. We had no idea what our families were doing 150 years ago. And now you're going to tell me that tree stumps are mountains. You've got to relax.
So, Box, let me ask you a quick question. Through your consensus of research, what would you say that the size of these giants were? The Nephilim, I suppose, or is it the children of the Nephilim? I haven't looked into it.
Well, I often compare the word to dragon because it is so general. Like the word dragon literally just means a nuisance reptile. It's just such a big reptile. But it's a size. Size matters. Obviously, size matters for dragons. Size matters for giants. That kind of just goes along with it. So if someone, back then there were certain cultures, a certain height, such as the Philistines, these people were, 10 feet tall? That's a giant, guaranteed. If you were next to somebody,
there's some that climb up to 40 feet.
Very well could have been. That's what I understand that as well. Yeah, so they're very well. Right, exactly. So there very well could have been such a variation that some of these people were literally 50 feet tall, or maybe even bigger in some rare occasions. Just like we have the dragon. Some dragons are maybe even 200 feet long, and some dragons are only 200 pounds. You could, if you had a Chinese water dragon that was 150 pounds. And it was in your house, it'd be worse than having a crocodile in your house. They can climb walls, they can climb trees, they can swim like a fish and run on 2 legs. So the size is a big deal. Just like if you had a scorpion in your house, that's as big as a quarter, that's not a big deal. But if you have a scorpion in your house that's as big as a Labrador, you're going to have a serious, so size matters, and there is a big variation. Just as in the dragons, we have many variations of dragons, large animals, even whales. The giants were varied, obviously. There was large giants, and there was even larger giants. And, that's we don't know for sure, but we have found the archaeological evidence, the weapons, the axes, shields, helmets, and some bones. And I don't know if they're all real, but even if 1% of them are real, then yes, there was 20-foot tall people.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked is let's pretend for a moment that the stumps are trees. Excuse me, that these mountains are stumps, two trees. Yeah. Well, the shortest one that he demonstrated was 60 kilometers high. I mean, what size of a group of people would have to exist to be able to properly cut that down as demonstrated and use and consume? Like, a bunch of 40-foot tall humans, I don't know if they'd be able to do that.
Think of it this way, though, is that we've also had fossilized footprints. The biggest fossilized footprint is like maybe 3 or 4 feet long. I think we'd notice, especially since we have airplanes now, if there was a footprint that was, 75 feet long, we'd probably see that. We have footprints fossilized of thousands of different creatures, even, deer, animals that are alive today, dragons, of course, and Paluxy riverbed with humans, and that was a giant. That guy's foot was 20 inches long, and they call him a giant, and he was probably only, 9 feet tall? He was a giant.
Yeah.
Paluxy riverbed's got the footprint right. So we have footprints of giants that are 10 feet tall. We have dragons, maybe 30, 40, 50, but that's it. That's the extent, and that's what the Bible spoke about. The Bible spoke about these creatures. Even some of them might have been abominations and mixtures, in certain times. But for the good matter is that, again, it's hard because a lot of people that don't want to believe in the Bible cathesis are going to have a much more difficult time. God spells every single part of this out. He even says in Job chapter 40:15 that this animal is so great, he's the chief of his way. So God is saying, this is where I put my stamp of approval on. If you want to look at one of my creations, look at Behemoth and stare in awe, because that is how important his creation is to him, which is another argument about, like, do these animals still exist? But that's how you can tell the difference. That animal is one of God's creation. That's clearly not an abomination. God put his stamp of approval on it. Well, God talks about giant people, but not that big. They're not even near that big. So when these people in their panel yesterday were talking cathesis, they each individually kind of kept going back to the fact that all we have is evidence that backs the Bible. Were they saying that directly? Of course not. But that's what they were all literally leading towards, which is, the idea of large people. Well, that's
what about the devil's advocate, argument that may bring people to the faith that the Bible presents? I mean, what if
because they're going
like
too
David
far.
Weiss,
That's my point.
I understand your point.
That's the point.
I do understand
That's the
your
point. They're
point.
not. They're abominating the Bible. They're actually ignoring it and going away from it and teaching their own doctrine. That's my point.
I understand. Okay, I understand where you're coming from.
Well, and that brings us back to the question of what is proof. How do you determine before you start an investigation what you're going to find is, how do you sort true from false, and how do you make this an objective thing that you don't just make up on the spur of the moment? Because if you do that, then you make up anything, and investigation is a waste of time. If people will say, well, the Bible's distorted, or where's the evidence? And it's like, well, first you got to tell me how you're going to prove anything one way or the other. What is proof, and how do you figure out how you're going to examine anything? If they don't,
you got to take it back to the presuppositions and the epistemology on it. And I've heard some arguments recently about, you kind of have to come from a point of a creator in order to be able to validate any truth. Like, it has to go back to that notion. But that's the epistemologically, how do you come to truth? And I think that a lot of people who aren't in the Christian mindset, or especially if they're coming from an atheist or a secular position, they don't understand necessarily what that means, and they could be working off of wrong premises, coming to wrong conclusions because of that.
And philosophically, everybody has blind faith at the very bottom of their, the very foundation of their belief system or worldview.
If they know it or not.
Yeah,
if they know it or not. That's the thing about atheism, is it's a belief system that makes you believe that you don't have a belief system.
Yeah.
It's absolutely devious in the way that it operates. I fell for it for 10 years.
That's funny.
From age
That's
23
funny.
to
I like the
33.
way you put that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened to me. I fell for the whole Four Horsemen, the Hitchens and the Dawkins and all that crap. 10 years, well, about 12 years ago now, like when I was 23, I was in college and I went full head into it. Ayn Rand, I was going full philosophical on it too. And I was one of these guys. I probably argued with you, Pillbox, at one point back in 2008 on YouTube somewhere. And, it took my own personal problems to bring me to a point where I'm like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Let me reevaluate my premises and see if I made wrong choices here philosophically. And I came to the conclusion that I did, and here I am, 2 years later, a better man for it. So I think these atheists are being, unfortunately, they're tricked. It's a devious.
You know what? You would think they would stop and ask someday why they define themselves by what they don't believe.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really
I'm a
good way
not
of
something. I'm not a something. I'm a not something.
Yeah, absolutely. And then by virtue of doing that, you're giving credence to what it is that you're saying you're not. It's
right.
I used to say about the devil worshippers. When I was an atheist, this was what I would say. I was like the Satan. I'd be asked by a Christian, "Are you a Satanist?" Because I said I was an atheist. I'm like, no. See, they're just as foolish too, because they're, by being so against God, they're proving God. You know what I mean? Just by virtue of them saying that they worship the devil. So, it's it's a really devious thing that they've done, and you can see if you look back historically in the past 20 years, they've released the atheists and the nihilists. Like that
Right.
was information that was put out at the same time by a team of people. They called themselves the Four Horsemen, you know, Hitchin, Harris, Dawkins, and Dennett. And they had a media team behind them, and then people in several different points of media, like Bill Maher and you know, just all these little, you know, comedian guys who were supporting it. And it was a full frontal attack on the 20-somethings. And a ton of them fell for it. I hate to say it, but it definitely was that in my view.
Right. Yeah. There's so many things, so many ways you can look at the whole thing and get down to that bedrock thing of blind faith, and then ask, okay, why is your belief better than mine, or your non-belief better than mine? Because we're all starting from the same point as far as not having a way to prove our foundational assumptions. I mean, nobody can do that. And yet, what we're seeing, is, especially in Flat Earth, it seems, is that, okay, as things get revealed, we're still, even though it matches the Bible, it keeps matching the Bible, and all this archaeology for 2,000 years has proven the Bible right instead of wrong. No, that can't be right. But we're still only going to attack the Bible and not the other things we claim it came from. You know, those don't get attacked. It's, you know, here we have the Bible borrowed from such and such before it, but that before it doesn't get attacked. Only the Bible gets attacked. And this, to me, is indicating that there's more going on here than just science and philosophy. There is a spiritual war going on.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, now look at the packaging, though, and here's another thing that everybody likes to miss, because we love riddles and we love oxymorons and you know, irony. Because when you say there's no forest on a flat Earth, you're already wrong. I guarantee you there are many forests on this flat Earth right now. Even though we've destroyed this world fairly decently for the past 200 years, there are forests now. So right away, when you have a fictitious statement right off the bat, there's already a problem. You're trying to attract people. You're trying to be provocative and entice people in a sense with a lie. You are lying right off the bat. And the problem is that I know that someone's going to say, well, maybe they changed the title. Every title I've seen, every single title, dozens of them, all says there's no forest on a flat Earth. What? There's something wrong. Now there's a train of lies already by itself that has caused a malignant spreading of perpetual lies. That anybody that just, you know, the average guy that goes to work and has to work for a living is going to go, what is going? Look, these flat earthers must be out of their mind.
That's what happened.
Right.
And that's what happened.
Exactly.
I've been over with all these heliocentrists over just in these other hangouts recently. You know, the flat Earth debates and such. And these are guys that just heard the term flat Earth, went on to a live hangout, wanted to discuss it, never done research, never done anything. They think that we're compoundedly more ridiculous because they also have, I've heard them talk about it. Oh, you think mountains are trees, you're retarded, get out of here. You know what I mean? Like, it has spread to them as a new tool to attack people who believe in flat.
Told you, Pillbox. We called it.
Absolutely, 100%.
It's there.
Absolutely.
It is absolutely there, and by all of them, and by all accounts. And I mean, literally, I've observed like 10 different people doing it in the past 48 hours. So,
and some of them are innocent. Some of these people that I know are actually Bible believers, and they're caught up into the momentum of this fad and this new trend and the enjoyment. And all these people saying, "Oh, we, look at us, look at we," and they're literally jumping on with them. So they're going to make their own version, or they're going to take a snippet of it, and they're going to call it the same thing. There's no forest on a flat Earth.
And like I said, you know, before we went live, the idea is interesting. It's imaginative. It's super interesting, actually. If you take it, let's say, just from a fictional standpoint, that's why people are relating it to Avatar and stuff. Like, this beautiful, like, interesting world comes to your mind when you ponder on this. And I think that's why people are reacting to it so emotionally, is because...
Oh, you just hit the nail on the head. You just hit the nail on the head. Now, here's why, Cathesis. This is profound. I cannot believe I didn't think of that. You're absolutely right. What that means is, guys, and everybody who ever hears this is what this means. It's because you don't even know about this world. You're impressed with an imaginative one that you've never been to. You don't even know this world. There are places you could go right now that would literally make your heart stop, that are so amazing and beyond your imagination, all over this real world right now that you don't know about. And because nobody knows it, and everybody is a westernized, TV-raised idiot, you know, so saying for the most of these people, we're dealing with the most ignorant people in history. country, westernized society, so that we
Yes.
shouldn't really raise the standard that high. But that's what this is. This is a massive deception, and it's mental. You nailed it. They are imagining a world, and how romantic it is. That's exactly what space
Exactly.
is. Space is the
And that
exact
is
same,
exactly.
exact
I
same
agree.
romantic fairy tale that space is. You can be wrong a million ways, and each
I
of
agree.
them are going to be wrong. There's a billion ways to be wrong. There's only one way to be right, and these people are deceived.
I agree with that. Really, it gets into your imagination. It gets into your heart especially when you really think it's true and you think it's real. Like space, it's a very good way of putting it. This whole infinite space and traveling in spaceships to other places and possible aliens, it's all fiction. That's the sci-fi they pushed out from 1890 to 1940 until they could legitimize it with Jack Parsons. Like that is my view on that. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if they were seeing it coming that we were going to find out about NASA fakery, and they had to come up with some other thing because the aliens have to come from somewhere because they still want their alien invasion, and they have to invent they have to disconnect us, take up every anchor of any kind of objective discernment before they can pull anything on us. So they've made us completely senseless by removing every possible anchor to reality and every possible way we could judge anything.
Yes. I like your train of thought. Like it's interesting to see how they're spreading this information. The whens, the whys, the what fors is what I'm asking.
Right. Yeah. They haven't deliberately so haven't taught actual critical thinking for a long time.
No.
Yeah, so that's why we have what we have. We have people just running from one whiz bang thing to another, like little kids in a park, in a amusement park. What's the next thrill?
Right.
There's going to be something else after the mountains as trees thing.
Yeah, I just looked up no force on flat Earth just out of curiosity to see how many hits it comes up with, and it's up to 43,000 hits.
Wow.
And you take a look, like when I found flat Earth, it was actually at about 50,000 hits. This was about a year and a half ago, and now it's up to 7 million, which is interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting to see that growth. But with this is what, a week and a half old, no forest, no flat Earth, and it's not that. I guess that's not too many, but it's still getting up there, and there's so many people mirroring it, so many people who are promoting it and talking about it, but it's only because the people who they find credible by virtue of how many subs these people have, do they agree with them or not, there's X amount of these people who have this influence, high subs, and who communicate with one another, who are using the same rhetoric. They're all saying the same thing, and they're all pushing it at the same time. So that is questionable in my view.
Right. It's just like the Truman Show seemed to be at first. That was the model. That was our reality. And now it's this tree thing that the kind of, we were talking about. Some would believe there's a dome and all these other things. And now, well, if these trees are, the mind-blowing new reality, then there can't be a dome. And here we go again. And they're just they're giving us stuff and ripping it away, giving us stuff and ripping it away. And that does something to you. It does something to your psyche, to have your reality not only changed once and your mind blown once, if they do it every other week now. And after a while, you can't believe anything. You can't even believe yourself, and then they have you. They can make you believe whatever they want.
That's a good point. I mean, that type of research into how to do that to people has been going on since Project Paperclip. Understanding how to manipulate masses through media. And for anybody who thinks that not doing that with YouTube or other forums on the internet, they're naive. Like, this has absolutely been, all media has. There's a reason why we're able to have this conversation. They are, I hate to use the elusive they, but what I mean is the control structure, the institutions, especially military-industrial complex, because YouTube comes from the military-industrial complex. CERN created the internet, and DARPANET is what we're using right now, with YouTube. So they knew the effect the internet was going to have on people. So what they did was, look at Google. all of their ownings, every one of the companies, they've done an umbrella corporation called Alphabet Agency.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys knew that, the
Right.
Alphabet Corporation. Well, to me, it really does, and this is a conspiracy theorist, but I'm sure I could trace it back. I'm pretty sure Google is the public face of the NSA. At this point, I'm pretty convinced that that might be going on, or at least they have all the backdoors through Google in all of their services,
I wouldn't
which
doubt
is
it for a minute.
YouTube. Yeah, which is YouTube and everything else. So I think that they know exactly how these systems work. They see the metrics. They see how when you put something out and it gets this type of response, and you put this out and it gets that type of response, it can be crafted perfectly to change a narrative. What if we were all getting really close with this, like this book, World Beyond the Poles, and then all of a sudden we get this whole tree thing coming around, and then that idea gets snuffed out. Not saying that's the truth of the matter, but that can be used that way, and people would be naive to think they're not thinking about it that way.
Right. Yeah, none of this is an accident, the whole flat earth thing and any of the fads that come and go. They know what they're doing, and even if they're telling us some true things, like when they broadcast 9/11 so many years before it happened, they always look at how we react, and they're always going to mark as well the people who don't react as expected, because it's a bell curve here again, where you got people at both extremes, the true believers who will jump at anything, and the ones who are skeptical of everything, and the vast majority in the middle who just kind of go along and follow one of the extremes. But
Absolutely.
But we're like the anomalies, the divergence of Hollywood. Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. Just I'm happy to be involved with it, because it's interesting to see people's I'm not a flat earther. I'm a flat earth apologist. I don't know.
Right.
That's what I say. That's my whole thing. I haven't been able to confirm through myself. I've gone all the way up to studying geodesy, going back to learn trigonometry better so that I could do it, understand the history of astronomy, understand the history of these sciences, and I still haven't made a determination. But at this point, I do think that space is not what they've told us, and probably the shape of the Earth is definitely not what they've told us. Seems like a flat, level plane to me, and it doesn't seem like we're moving. But I still am, at the end of the day, I'm not going to say, oh, it's absolutely this, because I think that's kind of that Hegelian dialectic. They put it's a false dichotomy, flat versus the ball. Well, what if it's something that's not even any of those options? So this is released. Either it be a Masonic thing or an agency thing or both. Who knows? But why did the popularity of Flat Earth come around when it did? Why did they get pushed the way that it did? What you have to stop and ask these questions. It's not to take away from it being true. It's just they could release it a specific way in order to get in front of it in another way. You know what I mean? Like they put the information out, but through controlled means, and then they get in front of the narrative. So that's the way I view it. I'm suspicious of it, just the same as I am with this, because you have, I'd say, a couple thousand, if not tens of thousands of folks who just changed their paradigm, who went and reevaluated what they knew, what they thought they knew, and they've made a new decision about their worldview, and it's impactful. When you realize that you're not spinning, and it's the sun, moon, and stars that are moving overhead, it does something to you. You feel more grounded.
Right.
It connects you spiritually to a creator. So many people are being brought to religion or Christianity or spirituality, however you want to put it. They feel something deep inside that almost has been taken away from us by locking us into this ball construct.
Right, the Truman Show thing. Yeah, the whole mentality, yeah.
Yeah, and once you, and I think that's what's so valuable about this. I don't care what the shape is at the end of the day. I'm just glad I got the phone call. I'm glad I can share this with people, because the process of me going from the beginning and having cognitive dissonance and making fun of flat earthers to going down this path and trying to understand what I know. I was disappointed that I knew so little about heliocentricity when I got into it, even though I was defending it to the real, to the keel. And so here I am now, a year and a half later, and I Still make no claims, but as you can see, I'm like 90% sure it's flat, 80 or
Right.
90% sure it's flat. But this is what I think they're doing now is they've softened up people's paradigms, like you mentioned earlier, and they're putting this tree information out to see how far these believers will run with it.
Right. Exactly.
And
I
I don't
just,
mean that word believers in
yeah.
that Christian religious sense. I mean it as in like people who are just willing to believe anything that they see. That's what I
Right.
mean.
I just wanted to. I'm going to stop sharing this in a second. Pillbox put this, shared this. This, what this looks to me, what some people would call roots on the edges here, looks more to me like this structure shot up from the ground, and that's what you would see. Because they don't look like roots to me. They just look like what you would see if you had anything underground and you pushed it up. You know,
Hmm.
that
Are
roots
you
and
sharing?
trees aren't the only things that come up. Do you see
Oh,
it?
I'm sorry. Are you sharing your screen right now? I'm not
Yeah. Do
able
you
to
not
see it
see it?
myself. You know what? My phone might be just messing up. I'm on
Oh,
my
okay.
phone
I'm
right
sorry.
now.
It's a
Don't worry about it.
typical mesa or whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
But it, like so many other ones like it looks to me like this is also this pattern that we normally think of maybe as tree roots would be the same as if you put anything else that was underground and just pushed it up like in an earthquake or something that shoots up from the
Lava
ground.
flows. Also, lava flows
Yeah,
if
that
it were
too.
there.
But this
Yeah.
this to me just looks like the main structure pushed up, and that's the dirt, the ground around it that got pulled up for a little bit around it. That's just, there's more than one way to look at it. Is what I'm saying. That is
Right, and you can look at it right. You can look at it 3 or 4 different ways, but there are no signs of biological,
right,
influence, or it is an erosion, or it's an excavation, or it's a subversion, or it's something that could have been pushed up or eroded away. That's it. That's as far as you can take it. The dirt there as well could have been just from the erosion piling up on the sides, which is what it does in my garden bed.
right,
Anybody can go outside with a hose and put just fill up a 5-gallon bucket of dirt, turn it upside down. Of course, it's going to be mud. You're going to have your miniature devil's tower, and then go start washing it away, and watch how the water
right,
washes it away. Good luck.
exactly. And that's again could refer to flood aftermath, in which the whole area there, the whole Grand Canyon, has flood written all over it because as we saw, or volcanic activity, because as we saw after Mount St. Helens, it formed a small Grand Canyon basically with the same kind of layering. And that's just what happens when you have something flowing over mineralized material. That's what you get. And so to say that this must be a tree, I mean, this is the pattern of nature, the fractal pattern, the Fibonacci, the golden ratio. This is the branching and flowing stuff that we see is so common in the world that why think it's only one piece of it, the tree? It's just such a narrow, blind leap of faith that nothing else can be possible, and that this is, the new greatest religion, and it just boggles my mind.
Right, and you're just talking about the fingerprint of God. One of God's tools is that sequence. That is the God sequence. Obviously, God designed all of the different patterns, and that's why we see so many of the same patterns in nature throughout literally thousands of different unrelated species or families of creatures that aren't even in the same sort of category. Whether it's the ram's horn or the seashell or the beetle or the way that the eye forms in certain insects. I mean, all of these things are just part of God's design. The beetle isn't even related to a spider, let alone a tree to a mountain. And that's
Right.
obviously against the cladistics that the naturalists, use for evolution. This is the same argument they have for using cladistics in different animals. Well, of course they're similar. The same creator created all animals, and they have to live together. It's kind of important. If they're not made out of the same material, how is the
Right.
horse going to eat the grass and the lion get the zebra? That's called the ecosystem. It's a symbiotic relationships where all things have to be able to live with each other. It's called symbiosis, and it has to work from the beginning. Period,
Right.
or it doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
And just because the mountain has erosion marks and they look like arteries or roots or something that's biological doesn't mean it's biological. We can see
Yeah.
clouds. I'm sure we can find a cloud that looks like a dog right now somewhere on the earth.
Right.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Go on, dear.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say what caught my attention originally when I saw it was the hexagonal shape that he points to on the first one, what is it called, Devil's Peak or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, that is a very interesting geological formation, and he, I think, might be falsely linking it to like hexagonal patterns, in plants. If you cut them and look, they really there's a relation, but it's not exact. Like, if you look at these formations on that particular mountain, they're very, I don't know, it's hard. It looks like a cooling pattern of when you were to out in the salt flats. There's hexagonal shapes, and that's drying. That's a drying process that tends to form like that because it's the most area. He's right in that regard. So I mean, it's interesting that you could relate it to plants and say, oh, well, that's absolutely fibrous of a silicon tree. Like, you have to also make this assumption of a silicon plant, which is so radical, and nobody points to this. You have to make this assumption that it would take this different type of creature that we've never seen, not creature, but plant that we've never seen, and that's what it would have to be for it to, solidify like that, or turn
It's just
to rock.
the design of nature that it forms these patterns, and they've got the analogy backwards. In other words, they say that everything came from everything with that pattern must be a tree pattern. Well, I'm just saying there's a pattern, and trees are one of those.
Yes, I see.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you can see it. I'm sharing the dry desert.
Yeah, I see it right now. Yep.
So that's, I think, is the key. Maybe we can focus on is that they've got their analogy backwards. That the trees are just one manifestation of the fractaling pattern of nature.
But what is the justification for someone to say that there was life forms in this creation that are not carbon-based when all of existence has said otherwise, first of all? And again, that is anti-Bible. That is literally blasphemy. As God says, here's the creation. It is symbiotic. It works together. That's the creation. You're going to say that there's living things outside of God's creation in his creation. That's, again, look at it. It goes right against the Bible. It's blasphemy.
Well,
I get your perspective. I'm not so certain about it in that regard. Personally, I just look at it as, well, there's no historical evidence for any other type other than carbon-based. I'm with you on that 100%. I see where you go with it, though, and that's perfectly relevant with your worldview.
Yeah, look at crystals. They grow. They're not, snowflakes. Look, they have complex patterns, but they're not alive. They're made of water. So to say that something that grows or something that has a complex pattern or something that's made of silicone must be alive or used to be alive is very bad logic, at least.
In the way that we understand alive, absolutely.
Right.
Like,
well, look at the contradiction. God says the life is in the blood, so there has to be fluid. We know that.
Yeah, I don't go too
in a
far
system.
with the life is in the blood. That's that. The specific situation for that, but the point being, life, at least as anybody can examine it, has DNA of some sort, or at least RNA, and
exactly, yes,
it's a code. Now, where's the code in crystals? It's not a language.
Well, it definitely has its pattern of creation. It probably has a very similar pattern of creation as other, similar objects are, because that's what it is. Just like the donkey has a similar pattern of creation as the dolphin, and they are not related.
Right. But this a good reference to evolution here, because they make the same logical errors.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just like with the fossil record. It's the sorting action of a flood to put, the small marine organisms are going to be at the lowest level. They'll get buried first, and the last to be buried will be the higher mammals who are trying to run for high ground. So they get buried last. So, there's other explanations, but evolutionists don't want to think about other explanations. In fact, they'll sue you and kick you out of the school system.
Yeah, they will.
Who doesn't know about the dogs who get upset right before an earthquake? Some mammals and animals, like obviously dogs, we witness these animals get upset before the earthquake even happens.
Right.
So I bet they were wrong. I bet during the flood the mammals were. I bet absolutely right.
I'm curious how you guys view this. So another point in the movie is that these like the Grand Canyon quarry, okay, some kind of
That goes to my
quarry.
next picture I sent.
And
Knowledge
yeah,
gathering.
what I was going
All
to
right.
ask is, I mean, they say the rock layers of the Grand Canyon are millions and millions of years, and the geologic record they claim. But you have in some instances where there are trees in the middle of multiple rock layers, which would point to a very fast something
Right.
happening, pointing towards a flood. They're claiming that the Grand Canyon is not from a flood, but it's a quarry, and all similar things are from that. Is it your stance that the Grand Canyon is formed from the immediacy of the flood?
I believe so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or the
This
Because yeah,
this
that
aftermath.
picture
does
right
kind
here
of
is the
go against
beginning.
that idea.
Oh, absolutely, and that's what water does. Water is the most powerful force in the world, and we've seen what it did. We saw what just ash and volcanic and a mountain slide did at Spirit Lake. Well, water is much more powerful than a volcano. I mean, a volcano has nothing on a massive flood. Absolutely nothing. Garbage. And the Grand Canyon is absolutely the Grand Canyon. You cannot see it all in the same picture. It is the biggest actual probably thing besides the Earth and the oceans that you can say there's a thing. If there's the oceans and there's the Earth and there's the Grand Canyon. It is so big
And
you
they
cannot
claim
even look at it.
that little stream is what made it.
Yeah.
That's what they
Yeah,
claim.
that would be psychotic. This is the beginning of it in this picture. This is the very beginning, and it gets much bigger. So look how it starts off and then gets larger and larger and larger, just like all washed out spillways do, because of course that's how it works. And this is the very beginning of it right there, and that's how you can see the point of least resistance is where the water is going to go. So if two pieces of dirt are just a little bit looser and the molecules aren't as tight, they're going to break away, and there you have the veins and crevices of a
Yeah.
washed out spillway.
Yeah, the branching pattern is what we see there. We're not a dig a scrape in the ground, and typically you can either follow whatever it is you're trying to dig up, and in which case there's to be some evidence left behind of whatever valuable thing they were scraping off the surface of the ground, but you don't see that kind of pattern. You see the natural flow of anything that flows, whether it's lava or water or whatever. That's the kind of pattern you're seeing there, not a digging out, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I see. It looks like kind of a one-time fast thing that probably happened. Yeah, and it's just interesting. Like I've been, there's a guy named Hank Hill. I don't know if you guys have observed him, but he's a Christian, biblical literist, I suppose you could call him, and he's been teaching me a lot about the flood. I had no idea some of the facts. I used to be an evolutionist, and anti all of these Christian ideals. I don't know what to think now. I've heard some really strong evidence that a flood has occurred, that science seems to want to glaze over. They don't want to acknowledge it. It seems like modern day scientism is, and it's different from practical science. Your day-to-day engineering science is very different. That's science with a lowercase s. Scientism, the capital S, it seems to be philosophically rooted in inverting whatever the Bible says.
Yep.
It's to me at this point, I'm like, wow, you guys have gone to some really great lengths to get to kind of flip every biblical truth. Stationary plane with pillars. Oh, they turn it into a spinning, wobbling, hurtling ball. Evolution. Well, there goes creation. The billions of years needed for evolution are created because of the heliocentric idea. The Big Bang cosmology, it's created because of it has to be that way for the heliocentric model to work, yet they have 92% dark matter and dark energy just to fill their equation. So the lengths that scientism goes to invert the Bible is very troubling. Like, people should really stop it. Like, I'm not a Christian in the sense of, like, a corporate Christian, going to church and like, I'm a Christian in the sense that I accept Christ within. Like, I understand that his path is the path. I accept him as someone who existed and has presented us with the way to go forward. All the ideas of his I accept as well. But I don't go to church. I don't, I read my Bible with the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and that's it. That's it for me. So when I look at this, and this is coming from an atheist, I used to be an atheist, very hardcore for 10 years. And over the past 2 years, Flat Earth actually had a lot to do with this. It's funny, my brother actually asserts that I've been tricked by a creationist cult. Like, that's what he thinks. And he's not super serious. He's my younger brother, and he just doesn't understand that I've come to new conclusions in life concerning spirituality and
Right.
God and such. He's 2 years younger. He's getting there too. But it's interesting because people say it is this whole, like Flat Earth specifically, is this whole Christianity thing. And I don't think so. I think if you
No.
take it seriously from a very scientific way and go back to primary knowledge, try to understand everything from that primary knowledge perspective, you're going to come to the conclusion that it's very different than what we've been told. So during that process, when you realize, like when you watch a time lapse of the sun, and you're not, what's the old song by the Beatles, the fool on the hill sees the sun going
Hmm.
down, and in his eyes sees the world going round. Well, in my eyes, all my life, I felt the world going round as I observed the sunset. Well, now after watching time lapse and putting it in the correct perspective, literally with perspective, I see it moving towards being away from me. When that happened to me, it completely like clicked. Everything clicked, and I had this massive spiritual like awakening. And that's the only way I could put it. Like I felt energy, or you could probably say I have the Holy Spirit flowing through me. But it was there. It was tangible, and there's remnants of that every day. Like I feel like I'm walking with God now, just by changing my perspective. I even sometimes joke that it feels like there's been black magic cast on people with these ideas. It's like a dark occultist spell that Jack Parsons did when he went up in those rockets. It's
Right.
just sorry, I get on a bit of a tangent
That's okay.
sometimes.
You brought out a couple of things. One is that when somebody changes their mind, we tend to believe that the change is always an improvement, and it isn't always. When somebody will say, well, I
Hmm.
used to believe what you did, like being brought up in a Christian home or whatnot, and then I learned better, and now I've changed my mind, and therefore I've done something better, and I know I'm closer to the truth now. But that's not
Good point.
necessarily true. A change, it's like the old phrase about from the frying pan into the fire. You made a change, all right, but was it for the better? Who knows? That remains to be proved. And the other thing is, and I think the most valuable thing we're going to find in any of this pursuit is relearning how to learn, how to think.
Yes,
They try to
absolutely.
take that away from us, and what we're doing is starting from square one on basic research, is like, and asking ourselves, how do you prove something? How do you know what you're seeing is real or not? And then how do you think about it and weigh the evidence? And we have to, I don't think we have learned that yet exactly because of this tree thing that just happened. We're still just jumping blindly and not asking questions, and that's what really bothers me about it.
Yeah, I agree. And you're going to have plenty of apologists on their side saying that, or there's no side, but the ones who are promoting it, they're the ones who are going to be saying, well, it's just an idea, it's fun to entertain, there might be some truth to it, etc., etc. But they're doing the, they're doing the whole thing no justice, in my view. Like it is
Right.
being pushed. It does bring people to possibly erroneous conclusions. There is so much proof for a flat motionless plane. Really,
Right.
there is. How much proof is there for this idea?
Yeah, and what's proof? You have to ask people to like say what they would accept as proof and why they would accept it and whether it's consistent,
Yeah,
because they're just pinging around, and it's that's how a group of people is easily manipulated, is they don't have any kind of mooring or any kind of standard. It's just whatever isn't the Bible, whatever isn't God, whatever doesn't mean I'm going to have to answer for my life or anything is demanded of me. It's very hedonistic, actually, and the truth has to be revealed. But at the same time, they want to do this slowly. Because they need to make sure that every step that we don't go completely back to any kind of objectivity and find God. Because that was a very, like you said, it was a very natural thing to conclude once you know that we're on a flat plane. It's somebody made it, somebody designed it. And you don't know how many years Christians have been, well, maybe you do, but Christians have been, pulling their hair out trying to get people to understand that a design requires a designer, and everything we see is evidence of a design. And now,
Everything.
and now
Everything.
Flat Earth comes along, and it's easy for everybody to take, even atheists, New Agers, whatever. Everybody says, okay, there was a God and a designer, but now we hate him.
There's a lot of ideas because Gnostic, philosophy has kind of crept into it. There's, New Age philosophy. There's, and that's something that I care about. Like that's my major was philosophy, and I really care about axioms and your
Right.
suppositions and you see this kind of being infiltrated. Like you got Dan Pratt screaming about Philema, and he's not wrong. He's not
Right.
wrong, and I'm not saying that he's right though. But these are philosophical ideas that do exist. There's Luciferianism that exists within this
Right.
flat Earth community. I can point several people that I can have evidence that their axioms are Luciferian in their choosing. So, is it bringing people back to spirituality? Yes. Is it bringing people back to the right one? As you said, just because you choose a new idea doesn't mean that it's the right idea.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's my concern.
And then try to keep challenging people. Okay, how do you pick which one is right? What do you use before you even start investigating to figure out how you're going to recognize truth when you see it, or fact?
Yeah.
And they don't know.
And well, let me ask you this. It's kind of a tangent, I suppose, but I'm curious because let's see, Pillbox, you still here? Sorry, I don't have my phone on me.
Yeah, I'm right here, bro.
Okay, well, actually, I'd like to get both of your opinion on this because this is something that's been troubling me. Like, I was raised very Christian. I was a Seventh-day Adventist. Think what you want. They are kind of crazy. But I was raised Seventh-day Adventist. I was actually trying to become a preacher, and I had given several sermons when I was about 15 years old. Well, come about 17, we moved to the city, and I get distracted with LSD and pot, and I go a different route. And I go into college, and I go philosophical, and I went atheistic, whatever. Well, now coming back to everything in the way that I am, I'm trying to approach it with the most discernment I possibly can. And I worry that the Bible has been infiltrated or co-opted. And you find a lot of Christians who believe it's the inerrant Word of God. Well, wouldn't it benefit the controllers to slip in a couple passages or take out a couple passages here and there or change the meaning to a couple passages in order to suit their needs? Like, take example like Romans 8. That whole idea is that governments are divinely put there and pay your taxes, pay the Caesar, you don't question it, just kind of go with it. I'm oversimplifying, and so I worry about, do you think, with your belief system, do you think that that's a possibility, that the Bible may have been infiltrated and turned into like a controlled opposition in some way?
I would, for me personally, I don't know if you were asking me or Pillbox, but I have a video that I put out on that very question of tampering. It's part of a series. I have a Bible lesson 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, that you might be interested in, because I agree to some extent that some things have been changed, but I know exactly where and when, depending, I could be wrong about some of it, but the point being that I looked at the details, I dissected it to find out more than just I suspect it. I have to know where it's changed and why I think it's changed, and when and who changed it, and what their motives would have been for changing it. And that's the kind of thing you have to do before you can say the Bible's been tampered with, is, okay, tell me where, show me each spot, and prove to me what, it's not a scientific proof, it's a more linguistic proof or archaeological proof, and get detailed. Yeah, you have to be detailed. You can't make blanket assumptions that the Bible's been changed. You have to show me where it's been changed, and I say, okay, I can see a spot here where it was changed, and because I have a method of determining that before I even start, then I can say, okay, it is possible to find what it should have been, And that's why I still have complete trust in it, because I know where the holes are. You know, it's just like
But at
Indiana
that point,
Jones.
it
Yep.
doesn't
Yeah, I'm
that
gonna add on
change
to
from
that.
it being the inerrant word of God, though?
What?
Well, that's where you got to use your discernment. Now, it's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would just do it. It has to be difficult. It has to challenge your mind. You are going to be challenged. That's the point to life. It wasn't just to make us robots. Everybody believes this, and here we are. Yay, we hold hands and hit pinatas. That's not how it's going to be. You know, obviously, it's supposed to be tough. Everything that I've ever learned in my life was a very hard lesson that I thought was really bad at the time. But then, thank God that I had to go through those trials and tribulations and figured out the hard way, because now I've earned the knowledge instead of, I don't want to be given anything. I have never been giving anything. I don't want to be given anything now. And when you read the Bible, it's not the easiest thing. I still have to go back and look at original Hebrew constantly. But of course, there are definitely some satanic versions of it. We have satanic churches out there. We have the biggest satanic organizations on earth are pretending to be Christians. That's exactly what the Bible says. Jesus Christ says, many will come in my name. It also says the path is going to be narrow. Now, as far as deciphering those words, I can go back to the King James Version. Most Americans, the vast majority, don't even know what the words mean. Back then, the English language wasn't what it is today. The word gay now doesn't mean what gay meant 300 years ago. In Job chapter 40, Job 1, God says Job was a perfect man. So, cathesis, what does perfect mean?
Without error.
That's what we do it now, right? Today we believe, but it did not mean that in the King James Version. Back then it meant upright man, or great example, or preferred. Isn't that funny? The word right there, perfect, it is there just like prefer. I prefer this man to be like this. 500 years ago, Job was an upright man. He was the one of the greatest examples, obviously, God ever talked about. That's why he's in the Bible. So was Moses in a way. Moses had to kill somebody. Sometimes things go wrong. You're going to have to sometimes shiv a gangster or two, to do your work for God. It's not all cupcakes and lemonade. There have been wars and deaths and famines, and the Bible, includes more destruction and death than any story in history, because it is our history. It's absolutely everything that happened. God had to wipe out the entire world. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, and it is hard to decipher. And I often, cathesis, you're going to have to go. If you're asking me, I would say you got to go to the original Hebrew. I've had to do it literally countless times because I wasn't sure. I didn't know that the word perfect didn't mean perfect like it does now. I had to look into it. Wait a minute, why does it say it can't be true? God says that all man is a sinner. So wait a minute, so perfect in no way means without sin. Guarantee right there. So
right, it's even better if you can go back and you learn to use Greek tools and go right to the Greek and not worry about the translation and go, okay, what did this word mean? What was its semantic range in the first century when it was written? Because that's a vital part of the context. And if you know that the word that the King James translated from, or any other translation was working with at the time, and they didn't have as much archaeological evidence as was discovered, say, after about World War II in the Dead Sea Scrolls, etc. And they still keep learning about the first century Greek, and you look at that word and how it was used in all the Greek literature, and what it was being used as in the first century in various kinds of writings, and then you have a better idea what they're talking about. And so when you look at the Greek word that was translated perfect, you can find that it had a range of meanings like every word does. That's why we have dictionaries. And you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it depends on the context sometimes which of those meanings you pick, and that's not a nefarious evil thing either, which some people, it's another rabbit trail.
Etymology is tremendously important in this as well, like you mentioned, linguistics.
And timing is everything in that. And so when you know what they were thinking in their head when they wrote that word in the first century, then you have a better idea of what it was what idea was being conveyed. And in that case, when it comes to perfect, it means it's talking about completeness and maturity and reaching the goal of your development or whatever is being talked about. And so that's, it's not saying sinless. That's a different word and everything. So it does get confusing in translation, especially English.
The preferred example. I see.
Right. It's just like the word let. In the Greek word means to prevent. And so that's the English word in the 1600s was you said let if you wanted to prevent something. Now it means the complete opposite. It means allow. And that's why you really have to try to get past the translations and do the work, but not everybody's cut out for that. And that's why it's, at some point each of us has to trust another person to do what they're equipped to do, and by putting our brains together and taking all the different perspectives in consideration, then we can get the best 3D view of what the real meaning is, or you know, the thing about trees or whatever it is. We can cooperate instead of fighting over it.
Oh, absolutely. And this leads me to my last question on this subject. And it's funny because somebody just kind of brought it up in chat. You see this a lot from the atheist crowd, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because it leads into kind of what I'm saying here. The Sermon on the Mount, this idea that the meek shall inherit the earth and to turn the other cheek at all costs. Wouldn't, just saying hypothetically, wouldn't that be something you would want your slave population to believe and to behave as? And so what I'm saying is the controllers, because it always has been this controlled and controller system. Like, we're still in a type of slavery system. They just removed the whips and chains, and they've added mortgages and car notes. But back then, wouldn't it have benefited them to teach them, no, you're a person who you worship here, Jesus, this is what he said. Be meek, don't question because of Romans, and don't respond if you're slapped, turn the other cheek. Now, I think the Sermon on the Mount is amazing and beautiful, and I agree with it. Most of my life, I've done unto others as I wish to be treated, and I've turned the other cheek more often than I didn't. So I agree with the premise, but what is your thoughts on that?
To be meek is like the opposite of being egotistical. And we hear so many people talking about you need to drop your ego. Well, that's exactly what Jesus was saying. He's saying the non-egotistical. Huh?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
It's the non-egotistical people who will inherit the earth. The ones who aren't trying to just get what they can for themselves and be self-centered. It's the people who cooperate. The people who are humble rather than humiliated. And people get those two things confused. They confuse meekness with humiliation and abasing yourself, and that's not what it's saying at all. It's just saying, be cooperative, be humble, don't be egotistical, and by cooperating, you will get the whole picture that you couldn't get by yourself, because we're meant to be missing something that someone else provides, and by cooperating, then we get the whole thing. And so this pattern is repeated throughout the Bible. It's meant to be not one person's show. It's meant for all of us to get along, but not by conformity, but by cooperation, which is voluntary and not brainless. You know, like conformity is peer pressure and following the person with the biggest ego. But what meekness is saying, what Jesus is saying by being meek and inheriting the earth, is you're just have finally figured out that it's not all about you, even though you're an individual and valued as such. You reach your best potential by finding out what other people have that you lack and plugging in and putting the puzzle pieces together. You know,
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
I'm glad. Sometimes I'm like, why am I not getting this across? I don't know what to say.
Oh, you're getting it across beautifully in all points tonight. So what about you, Pillbox? I mean, do you think it's something that could have been inserted? Not the meek, because that's obviously very important as explained, but what about the turn the other cheek aspect? I know this might sound blasphemous, this question, and I'm not trying to...
No, there's different scenarios with different rules and different circumstances and different outcomes and different byproducts. There's an individual explanation for almost every type of incident you could ever get involved with in the Bible. And sometimes you're supposed to take up a sword. And sometimes you're supposed to sell your garments to get a sword, you know. So it depends on the actual individual scenario.
Hey, Bill.
You just left. Yeah.
What's up? If I can just interject one thing, there's in studies that I found a aspect of context that most people don't know about, is that in that culture at that time, if you turned your cheek, you were insulting the person who had hit you once because they did so without provocation. That is to say, they were in the wrong in hitting you in the first place. So if you turn your cheek to them, you're telling them, go ahead and hit me again. You're insulting them and saying, hey, look, you shouldn't have done that.
Right, so actually that's also a form of condemnation then. That would
Right.
not just
It's a
be
judgment,
ignoring. Yeah, that's actually a version of condemnation. And there are times where God says to call out the heathen.
Right.
So there's different scenarios, and we have to figure out in each different scenario what we're supposed to do. If somebody steals your lunch, okay, I guess I'll turn my cheek, and that's the last time that's going to happen, and the byproduct is going to be bad for you, obviously, because in the long run, I'm not going to trust you anymore. And now if anybody asks me, you did this or whatever, I mean, yeah, in certain circumstances, yeah, you steal my lunchbox, I'm going to turn my cheek. Yep.
Oh, I agree completely. That's my modus operandi usually is like, that's what I was taught growing up, and that's the way I behave with other people. But my concern is more of that infiltration aspect. And I'm just being overly skeptical. I'm not trying to come off as blasphemous or anything.
Well, it
like
is
that.
infiltrated. It is. It's absolutely
Right.
infiltrated, and God said many will come in his name. It's the most infiltrated thing in all of history because Satan knew, being so smart, that the best thing to do is to pervert Jesus Christ and lie about the Bible and pervert as much as possible. That's the main goal of Satan, so you're absolutely right.
What I think is kind of funny in a way, or shows God's genius in this, is that in its effort to hide the Bible, the Catholic Church actually wound up preserving it better than anybody else could, because they locked it away and tried to cover it up and put out false versions, or add things, subtract things, whatever it is they did, and keep it from people so they couldn't read it, so they couldn't know what the truth is. So they preserved it. They locked it away. And now we can dig it up and find it. So, what they meant for evil, God turned into good. That's another recurring biblical theme. It's like, yeah, bad stuff happens. It's like the Dark Ages, all the time when the Catholic Church reigned with an iron fist, that it wasn't complete. It was a temporary thing. And even through all those years, there's a book I've read called The Reformers and Their Stepchildren, which is an excellent covering of history like you usually don't see, where there's always a group of people who held on to the truth. It was never completely dark. There was always a small light. Mm-hmm. But in spite of all that, it couldn't be defeated. And here we are still talking about we have access to all the information of history. It wasn't snuffed out or we wouldn't be here. And so whatever is going on, the big picture is that no matter how hard they try to cover up the truth, it's going to come out. And so all they can try to do is keep twisting it with the tree thing, with the Truman Show, whatever it is. And if we can just recognize that when it starts to happen again, I think we can be even quicker to cut that off at the knees. Mm-hmm. And before it gets legs and runs all over the place like this.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, and that's why I'm happy to be having this conversation, because I've just observed the past week and a half, and it just seems quite strange. I mean, we have a really good community of free-thinking people, very creative people, very interesting and bright in everybody's own unique way. So if disinformation is coming out, we need to have the discernment to kind of recognize that.
Right. And that's the judging thing, just to bring up another thing that gets really confused. There's one context in which you are supposed to judge and another which you're not. And the one that you're not, where people always quote that one, where Jesus said not to judge, is he's talking about double standards, not failing to or refusing to ever make a choice or choose between good and evil. He's not saying that at all. He's saying the standard you use for others, you should use for yourself, and God will use when you're judged. He'll use that standard on you, because it's what he was saying when he said, how could you complain about the speck of dust in someone's eye while you've got a plank of wood in your own eye? That's the kind of thing he says, do not judge. Here you are saying you're, this perfect righteous person, and you do these terrible things, and somebody else does the terrible things, and you're all over them. And that's what he's saying, don't judge, don't be a hypocrite.
Yes, and that usually comes from egoic behavior. People
right.
who are mainly identified with their ego.
And the meek don't do that.
I agree. No, I really thank you for having that conversation with me. It's just been something I've got two Bibles sitting on my desk, and I'm constantly reading and going back into it. I mean, I read it front to end, when I was young, and I'm 35 now, and reapproaching it with this different discernment and different understanding, where I'm just being more skeptical than I
Right.
ever have concerning these old books. But I mean, the Bible has stood the test of time. I mean, what other book can you show that has lasted this long? It's interesting to me that, I mean,
Right.
sure, there are
Yeah,
other holy books,
Like
but
the Quran copied the Bible and still couldn't keep it, and they had to change that. And they copied the Bible and couldn't keep it. They had to divert away. There's people that have gone. I have friends that have obviously gone to Afghanistan now. In the past 20 years, many of us know people that have gone to the Middle East. One of these guys, I'll just call him the finisher. That's his name on here. He found an old Quran, and he said that there were He said it was like literally reading the Torah, the original Bible, and it was like, just literally tattered, and he said it was probably 600 years old, or he said if he would have kept, he's regretting not keeping it. There was a problem. Of course, he wishes he had it. But he read he learned Arabic. He's a real smart guy. Learned Arabic and was like, wow, the Quran isn't what the Quran is now. So the Quran, who copied the Bible, couldn't even keep it. And there are bad versions of the Bible today, like I don't know if it's called the Catholic Bible, but we know that it's been perverted. And that's why you got to use your discernment and go back in time and look at what they were saying. I just love I think it's harder to decipher the Old Testament to me. And I just love looking at the original Hebrew. What is this? What is a ball? What is a circle? What is a sphere?
Yeah.
It's great, when you read these things. So.
And
Right.
for me, like I'm very suspicious though of all the different versions. Like the NIV to me seems completely deceptive in the way that a lot of, and that's just me from what I've observed. Like,
There are
I
errors.
guess you could say I'm kind of one of these King James
All
only.
of them. All of
Right,
them
so you
have
have to make the assertion, like, if it has an error, does that mean it's completely deceitful? Well, it means that person lied when he translated, when he called behemoth a hippo, because obviously a hippo doesn't have to go underneath willow trees to go through the river.
Right, and it doesn't have a tail like a cedar. I mean, I
Right,
laughed at that too, and I like the NIV, but I laughed at those parts. And I don't think it's necessarily that they're being deceiving or evil when they do those things. They're trying to follow guidelines
Modernize it.
that try to not be too abrasive to evolution and all that, and that's where the compromises come in. The King James has its own compromises. It was the one that heavily pushed the divine right of kings because that's what James wanted. And James's motivation for doing that translation, or actually he had nothing to do with it, he just ordered it. There's a guy named Bancroft that did the dirty work, but the thing was that his motivation was that he hated the Geneva Bible because that's what the Calvinists were using, and exposing the duplicity of the king in trying to make himself God, basically. So James said, okay, we're going to make one that does it my way. And we're going to translate certain words like baptize. That's actually a transliteration. It's a porting of characters from one language to the next without translating the meaning. And it comes from the word baptizo, meaning to immerse. And the king didn't like immersion. He liked sprinkling. So the translators are like, we're going to take the middle road here and make up a word and not translate it immerse. So that kind of thing went on with the King James. So if you can take all the translations and find dirt on any of them, and that doesn't mean the devil's doing this.
No, I understand that completely.
So
I think it more has to do with like who's in power at the time and what ends they're trying to achieve by doing these translations.
Yeah,
like with Romans, like the Romans 8 thing. Do you think it's possible that King James wanted that in there, saying a specific thing to like?
Oh yeah.
Sure you think that could have been done that way?
Yeah, to an extent. Now, not completely. I have other writings where I analyze that chapter and go, no, this isn't what Paul's saying. It's like when he says to pray for your rulers, he gives the reason so that you will be left in peace. He's not saying support the government in everything it does. If they go to war, you go to war. He's not saying that at all. He's saying...
Well, it's used that way by a lot of people.
It is. And how it's used is not the same thing as evil translators working for the devil, as a lot of King James onlyists like to totally slander people. And even some of the Greek translations, or the Greek family of documents, they will say, well, Westcott and Hort were Luciferians, and that's complete hogwash. And there's even a website trying to defend them, going, look, here's the facts of these two people, and that they did not have these associations. They were not Satanists or witches or anything like that. That's the kind of just bald-faced lies that get spread because somebody's isn't like a particular translation, and that's a completely different issue from people making a mistake because they didn't have all the documents at a time in history, or people with some kind of agenda. And I can go back to the Hebrew. There's something called Paleo-Hebrew that nobody even knows about that's different from the later Masoretic Hebrew that was invented after the time of Christ to hide messianic prophecies. And if you don't, I can show you where that happens. I did that in the video. And that's what the level of what you have to know in order to say the Bible's been changed. You have to know when and where and why and who did it. When people just say it's changed, I'm like, prove it, show me.
Yeah, very good point.
That's
very interesting. I really appreciate your answer to that, because that's just where I'm at. I'm approaching all of this with more caution, because we're given this stuff usually as children, just the same. I hate to make the connection, but just the same as like high scientific ideas like heliocentricity, we don't have the faculties to be able to make our determinations. And that's not to say that it's wrong to be given a religion that young, but you don't have the faculties to be able to question it and discern and know the historical context, and so I'm just trying to apply that now as an adult.
Right, and it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of time, and not everybody has it. So what I try to do is, I've had the time and the interest, and I try to summarize these things, but even then, it's like, you know what, you're still taking my word for it. But
well, I'm definitely going to look at that video. I didn't realize you had that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll put a link to my Bible and Christianity playlist. That'll probably be the easiest thing rather than posting every single thing. There we go.
I appreciate
that. I put that in the public link, if you can see that there. But and I have websites too. Let me post those. Let's see. I have several of them. That.
Excellent.
And from those
that really bothers me when Christians try to use that passage as if we're supposed to obey the government's laws, when if something isn't upheld by the government and if they claim it's a law, then it's not a law. If they don't follow the laws, they're not the laws. It's an illusion. Right. This is the grand deception. These are not laws. This is not a real government. This is Babylon. The God didn't say, do what Babylon says. This is a complete abomination. This is the worst, probably the worst country that's ever existed, and it doesn't even make, it's not even a country. They don't even call it a state. They call it states. They call it United States. It's
a corporation.
The entire thing is a hoax. There are no laws. If police and corporations, and lawyers and judges don't have to follow the laws, there are no laws.
No, they have to follow legal, not laws. Like, that's what the trick is.
There's no such thing. It's a hoax. It's an illusion. There's no such thing as laws in America. There's no such thing as legal. It is a grand deception. All they do is manipulate it and pervert it. There's no such thing. It's one of the massive deceptions. That's what it is.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I've been listening to Isa Mahal. He's a gentleman who's been coming around the Hangouts quite often. And think what you will about him. He does some really solid information concerning, I hate to use the word, but the free man movement, where you're just kind of analyzing legalese and kind of like hillbilly, his tack on things. And it's a paradigm shift. It's to understand how much language has been weaponized against us in that system itself. I started thinking about that because you're mentioning there's no laws. You're right. This is a whole other system that we've actually been told that you have to dig into and kind of find out. Admiralty law, everything's a corporation, it's commerce, and that is just for the people who don't know, you're treated as a slave. Your name is actually you're a corporation. The whole straw man aspect, that's a reality. People want to say it's conspiracy theory talk, but it's not. We are all corporations.
Exactly. It's in plain sight too. It's not like they hide it, Cathesas.
No, not at all. And it's a paradigm shift, because when people think they know about what their system is and whatnot, and this comes along, I've seen a lot of people get really mad about it in the chat, But this all just ties into how deceptive things can be. It's like people have weaponized. Well, the controllers have weaponized language against us over the 500 to 1,000 years.
Right. And
You
that's
know,
exactly what Orwell was talking about and what Edward
we
Bernays did. They're using it as a
yeah,
weapon. If I may just make one other point about if I could summarize what the Bible says to do as far as acting toward government is try to keep your head down so that you can live in peace and do what you need to do and if by example even the apostles were like decide for yourselves whether we should obey you or God. They drew a clear line in the sand when they did that, and they said you can make your laws but we're not going to listen to you if you're in God's way. And so
yeah,
there we have it. I mean, everything else is going to stem from their example. And even Peter said Paul's words were hard to understand and people twisted them all the time. And so it should come as no surprise that after all this time and the language barrier and the culture barrier, that we're going to get some things wrong and misunderstand them. And it's just
yeah.
going to happen. And that doesn't mean that all the translators are evil, and it doesn't mean that we should be stupid and think, well, God says obey the government because God put it in place. No, it takes a little thinking. It takes some common sense, which, as we all know, isn't common anymore.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of discernment, and you need to be operating with the Holy Spirit, or with what people call the Holy Spirit, and I understand that now, like I really do. So, thank you. It's definitely
Sure.
a good topic.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to go through all this stuff, and it kind of took on an agenda of its own as far as trying to think of what are we going to talk about besides the
Yeah,
rocks as trees thing.
yeah, it's very natural progression.
It is really all related. It's all. I wouldn't want to try to draw the Venn diagram for this sort of thing.
But it is, and this is why I think this topic is so, well, flat Earth in general, I think is so healthy. And you find so many
Right.
people who wish to dissuade others from looking into it. And I can't stand that. Like, that makes me the most angry. Like Negator and, that,
Right.
that crew of these guys who have been around for a year. Why are they still here? What are they doing with their life? They disagree with something so much. Like, what do they think that they're doing and they're dissuading people from looking into it. So you'll get a guy who's just started looking into it for 3 weeks. He's totally unsure. It's just something that he can't get his head around yet. And you got the likes of Negator going in there and just completely decimating, his understanding of it. And he'll just go right back to the ball.
Yeah.
But if you go on this path of exploration, you're going to be outside measuring the world around you. You're going to be reading about esoterics and metaphysical concepts, or what the ancient cosmologies were. Like, I call it alternative speculative cosmology. Just, this is such a healthy thing to go and do that
Right.
just makes me angry when I see people trying to dissuade others.
Right, that's the thing is with all the negativity too. You look at who's trying to tear people apart as opposed to who's trying to bring them together, and you look at who's trying to open your mind and show you how to find truth rather than who's going to try to close your mind and say, I'm dumping in what I think is true and you better not, associate with anyone I disagree with. And that's is about
Yes,
the clearest thing we can look at as far as, who should I listen to, is just use your head and look at how they're acting and whether they're trying to control you or not.
absolutely.
So yeah, and all the whole thing with creation and everything, it's all so intertwined that you really can't separate it completely. You can go down a branch here and a branch there, but in the end, they're all coming from one tree and trying to get to the root of that.
Yeah, the axioms, they
Yeah,
absolutely matter. I mean, it's either, see, I look around now and I only see creation. But
right,
to a materialist, they look around and they see natural processes over billions of years. The cosmology is just a bunch of rocks and gases banging into each other and mass
right,
attracting mass somehow. And they see this whole a fiction of this Big Bang cosmology and to get us to where we are now. And you have to accept evolution. You have to accept, heliocentricity and the billions of years, etc., in order to look around and say, oh no, this isn't a creation. This is all just natural. This is
hmm
just something out of nothing. It's just the way it worked, right? it's still a belief system at the end of the day.
Yeah.
The Big Bang is, and whatever they come up with, it doesn't matter. If they're trying to rationalize this away from being a creation, then what they're doing is false, in my view. Think of where science would be if they kept the creator in the equation.
Right.
That's what really frustrates me when I look back at the history of our sciences.
Yeah, or at least not banned him. You know?
Absolutely.
They banned
Yeah, I don't
God.
mean all the equations, exactly. Like, just don't abandon the idea, but they push it out. And it's caused damage, in my view.
Absolutely, because it's another one of those look at what they're trying to do. They're trying to control you and tell you what not to think.
Yep, absolutely. And you've got so many people who, and I was one of them, who just go down that line of education, thinking that you're smart for having this knowledge, and it feeds your ego. You know, you get a degree, you think you know what you're talking about, and it's a whole system of control, because the end result, and people get mad at me for saying this, or a couple of people, but the end result of heliocentricity, the Big Bang cosmology, is atheism, which leads to nihilism.
Right.
If you are intellectually honest with yourself and you follow it from axiom to conclusion, that's the conclusion, is nihilism.
Right.
And it's really a dark thing, and a lot of people don't like to face that that's a possibility, that the controllers could have given us a philosophical structure that makes us feel worthless. Well, what a better system to give to a population you wish to control.
Right. Because then they put all their worth in the state or whoever is ordering them around.
Absolutely. And people, this is free-range farming. This is all this has been. You know, religion was one of the first systems of human farming. And what we have now, these corporate nations, so to speak, this is just free-range farming. If I want to go to Uruguay, I have to sign a bunch of papers and kind of go from one farm to the next. This is just the way this system works, and people need to wake up and realize that the cosmology that they choose to accept has everything to do with the way your day-to-day goes.
Right.
People are so disconnected from that, because when you choose I won't say the right cosmology, but when you choose not the wrong one, if you choose one that backs the idea of empowerment, because you're empowered with the belief in a creator, because you're not divorcing yourself from reality at that point.
That's an excellent point, because most people just on the surface think God wants to control me and that's a bad thing. I don't want anybody to control me.
So
what he's doing is freeing them.
Absolutely.
You know? Because self can be a prison. I mean, like we were saying about cooperation, you can do so much more by cooperating with people. That means you have to humble yourself, which means you're not all there is. And so God can facilitate that sort of thing, because he can be up there saying, oh, well, if I get this person and that person together, magic happens, you know, and that if you're self-centered, then you're never going to get there, and people will be fragmented and alone, and of course they're easier to control that way.
Absolutely. That cosmology is egocentric, ultimately, when you break it down philosophically. I don't know if you're familiar with Ayn Rand. Have you heard the philosopher? She wrote, Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. Well, she has more books on philosophy, nonfiction works, than anything. She's got like 40 nonfiction works. She's an amazing author. I can't take that away from her.
Right.
But if you look at her philosophical framework of what she calls objectivism, the tenets are, it's very Aristotelian, A equals A, 1 + 1 = 2. Deny all mysticism, deny all supernatural creator, deny all anything that it could be considered supernatural, and to accept that the ego is the highest form of man. Okay? That is the premise. And if you look at our country, since that philosophy was so pushed in the 50s, we're dealing with the results of that. All the deviancy and degradations that we see around us, it comes from axioms that society has accepted. And a lot of people don't talk about it like that, but we're dealing with a very egocentric, nihilistic, you only live once, do whatever the hell you want mentality, and people do not feel like they have any power. But when you accept a creator, you know that you have the divine within you. You have the creator with you. You know, you are part of the whole, as I like to put, and that's empowering when you
Right.
really understand what that means.
And people just, that's the one thing we have to try to talk about and get to the forefront, because so many people are saying that no, we're being restricted by God, and that He's keeping us from, they erroneously call it the tree of knowledge when it's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, not just knowledge. And they're saying God is withholding it from us. This is the theology
The
of the Watchers again.
It's the Luciferian story.
Exactly, and so they're saying that, well, God is afraid of us knowing things. Well, in reality, what He's doing is saying, you don't know how dangerous it is outside of these boundaries, and I'm trying to keep you safe. And if you run away, don't come crying to me when you get hurt. But people do anyway. It's like, they stub their toe and it's God's fault. And
Yeah.
anybody, the last person at fault it was, because He didn't stop them, because they want God to do two mutually exclusive things. They want Him to micromanage so nothing bad happens, and at the same time they want Him to leave them alone and not be puppets. And it's like, you got to make up your mind. You can't want two contradictory things like that and then get mad at God no matter what happens.
Yeah.
And it's not thinking. It's the opposite of thinking, and then they consider themselves so enlightened and free and independent.
Yeah, and that's the whole Luciferian notion of Lucifer being the good guy and Jesus and God being like dictators or, like a control. That's the way they view it. That's at the core of their philosophy. I'm not talking about like Satanism. I'm talking about Luciferianism, like the
right.
And this comes from Gnosticism. This is what Masons believe. Freemasons,
Right.
Rosicrucians, all of these at its very top is this idea that Lucifer is actually the good guy. And
Right.
it just blows my mind that it's such a pervasive philosophy. People accept it without even realizing it. But yeah, it's got consequences. All of these choices and belief have consequences.
Right, exactly. And that's that big complex Venn diagram again.
Yeah. Yeah. So I see it everywhere, and the Big Bang cosmology I believe is what enables Luciferianism to grow. This idea that we need to get all the knowledge. And isn't there a quote in the Bible that says the knowledge of man is nothing to like the wisdom of God?
My ways are not your ways. My thoughts are higher than your thoughts, that God is saying, something like that.
Yeah, and then also, yeah, like the knowledge of men is foolish compared to the wisdom of God, and then like so. I mean, I look at it like that. Like if you're one with God and you're walking that path, then ego is the last thing you're going to fall for, and that's the adversary, in my view. I mean, just on a microcosm. I'm not talking about like the actuality of how this all works, but Satan is ego and God is spirit, and we have this within us. It's ego is being the adversary. It's constantly either being adversarial to someone else or to yourself. People are beaten down by their own egos.
The ego is what Lucifer, whatever, people get hung up on which name you call him, but I'm just, for convenience, this created being that God made, it was ego. It was, I want to be God. I don't want to bow to anyone. And now I believe Satan is a personal being, an actual identifiable being, not just an idea or ego or something like that. And people may disagree, but the point being that is the attitude that started all this suffering.
Absolutely.
Ego is a bad thing, not to say we can't have self-esteem, that's the other extreme.
Yeah, and if you look at it, anytime ego is involved, to a negative degree, because there's such a thing as, I think, as a healthy ego, which is usually in check and it's not running your life, and you use it for, you use it as a tool. It's your objective discerner. You're trying to, find out what to do in this world. You use that tool, but when it runs you and you think you're the chatter in your head and you have no connection to the spiritual within you, and forgive the word, the New Age has ruined it. What I mean is that your connection to God, if you feel that in your solar plexus, you feel that in the center of your body when you connect with it. People say it's the Holy Spirit. But when you're in ego, you're not in the moment, you're not present, you're not walking with God, you're not with the Holy Spirit, you're with the adversary, you're with man. And it causes so many, when distortions of ego occur, you see the deviancy that comes out of it. And it goes very dark. It gets very dark. If you
Right.
look at the, like, ritualistic sacrifice and the more sick things that we know exist in this culture, it's by a pursuit of ego.
Right. It's how much power I can amass to myself, and
Yeah.
and when you have a response, an egotistical response to someone, you get tension and you get fear, and you're, fight or flight because
Yep.
somebody's threatening your power or control. Whereas if you're meek, then there is no tension and there is no something to defend. You're just being open and actually vulnerable, and
Beautifully put.
just
Yeah.
that's trust, and the trust is such a hard thing for people to have anymore, and I don't blame them because we've been lied to, and that's the thing that we're all woke up to in this, is being lied to. But now we have to try to heal the broken trust somehow and get people to see that meekness and cooperation have to have trust. You're going to be vulnerable, but it's worth a shot, because the only alternative that I can see, unless there's a third way somebody can think of, is to have that tension and the egotistical response and the, defend myself because I've been hurt. And that's really
Yeah.
ego talking,
But you see what the meek do, and this is the one thing I've taken away from Jesus all of my life. They know not what they do.
Right.
That phrase has changed my life in so many dramatic ways, because when I've been hurt, or I look back on my past when people have hurt me in significant ways, at the end of the day, I still am able to forgive them instantaneously because of that. When they're operating out of ego, they don't know what they're doing. They're
Right.
not in the moment. They're oblivious to it. So they do. Jesus was right. They know not what they do.
And if we leave it to him, who can know what's in their heart, whether they knew what they were doing, because some people, obviously do know what they're doing and they do intend to harm, he'll figure that out. That's not for us to figure out. It's not, when somebody tries to demand that we answer what's going to happen to this person or that person, and that isn't fair. Well, I don't know. I'm not God, and it's not my place to say. What is in my place to say is what God told me. And
Yeah.
if he says, trust me and you're good, how hard is that, and why should I say something else? It's that lack of ego thing again, and
Yeah.
trust. And that's really, in the end, all I know is that I trust God because I know him, and I trust him to be as merciful as he can possibly be, because, he said point blank, not only by becoming one of us and sacrificing himself, but also by just saying, I don't want anybody to die. I don't want anybody to be separated, but it's their choice in the end, because I'm not micromanaging. And, there's a delicate balance between free will and allowing us to the point where we get deceived. And that's why we have the Bible. That's why we have people with the Holy Spirit are supposed to be trying to get this, message out. And in the end, though, it involves trust, and that's the biggest hurdle I see trying to get people over because of all these lies. And it's really hard.
It is. It is. And this is why I value philosophy as much as I do, because if you understand your axioms, you'll understand your outcomes. And it sounds like an abstract notion, philosophy in general, or understanding your theology, which is just merely philosophy. It's all religion is early philosophy. So if you understand your axioms, you'll know your conclusions, and I think that people need to take the time to evaluate what ego means, what does spirit
Right.
mean, or soul, or however you want to put it. There is this mystical side to humanity. You can't deny. This is what I get with the atheists can't stand it when I point this out. Like, it is consistent across all cultures that we have spiritual experiences,
Right.
that we know God, that we connect to something. And Jim Panda, I don't know if you know him, he's a globalist troll, but he's a really nice guy. Like, I've had really great conversations. He's an atheist, and his problem is that he feels that he may have been born without the ability to be spiritual. That's like his major concern. And then he even concludes, like, well, it seems like something that I have to accept before I can feel it. and I'm not prepared to do that. And
Right.
I think that's the biggest issue. For me, that was the issue. For me being an atheist, I was very much like, no, I'm not going to accept that mystical. I'm going to deny it. I'm going to say it doesn't exist. And I'm going to keep putting the blinders on and go down this atheist path. When I finally sat down and accepted it, my life changed radically. God will reveal himself to you or itself to you in
Right.
many, many ways. You just have to ask for it and be prepared to go on that journey.
That's the key. You have to ask. You have to be open, vulnerable, whatever you want to call it, to the possibility. And sometimes you do have to take a leap of faith. I mean, think about the alternatives to not doing it. You know, it's like you said, it's kind of if you follow it to its logical conclusions, it's a dead end, and it's really depressing.
It's a damaging dead end.
Yeah.
I would wake up every single day and say, what's the point? I gained 120 pounds. I was in a car accident, and I was on pain medication for about 2 years. My life had deteriorated into such a way, and I'm not going to say that all of that was caused by a lack of belief in God, but what it was false premises and the blinders that I put on. And you know what I mean? Like, it's just this snowball effect, and it starts at your axioms. So when I finally had to go through, like Pillbox was saying, like a hard life experience to make you reevaluate things, it was through that process that once I accepted that there is a creator, that there is a mystical or this unknown side of humanity, so to speak, I was able to lose 120 pounds in 8 months. I was able to get my life back in order. In short order, within a year, I had done so much to rectify the situation, and this would have taken 5 years in my eyes at the time. Like, I went and researched how the body works and how we've been misled in the medical industry, and I just went on a radical high-fat diet. I lost 120 pounds in 8 months.
Wow.
I just stopped eating carbs and sugar. And like, I ended up having my six-pack, and I've never been fit, and I've never been, that always was kind of like a chubby guy. So this was, God revealed me the deceptions that essentially were in the medical industry, and allowed me to construct like a different approach to my body. So it came, though, from, at the origins was me accepting that there is a creator, or there's a mystical, or however you want to put it. There's a spiritual side to humanity. It's almost like an emotion that we have. You can either avoid it, like anger, like people avoid anger and deny it, or you can accept it and embrace it. And I think when you do, you're walking with God at that point.
Right. In the end, it's a choice. How you react to whatever you experience in your life, good or bad, is your choice to make. And I know there's some people are as emotionally or spiritually damaged as some people are physically, where God takes that into consideration. I mean, he knows whether you are capable, or you've been so damaged that you can't even do anything supernatural anymore. He knows that, just as he knows somebody who would be put into a coma. It's not that he's saying, when we say you got to trust Jesus to be saved, we're not saying that God makes no exception for somebody who is incapable, or somebody who dies before they're old enough to understand that, anything like that. No, God will be merciful, but at the same time, if you're fit, we expect you to walk places and not be carried. And in the same way, if you're not emotionally damaged to the point where you're unable to understand or accept God, then you're responsible. And what you do with that is your choice to make. So, we can't say that, there's a lot of people who will use that objection and say, that God is evil because this, that, and the other, that some people never heard or whatnot. And I'm like, you know what? You're judging God on the basis of incomplete information, and you really haven't thought this through.
Yeah, they're applying the wrong lens to it, or the wrong filter to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I see that a lot, especially with the atheist crowd. They always blurt out that whole sky daddy, oppressor, dictatorship, and like you were talking about moments ago, it's the most superficial understanding of what a creator implies.
Right.
And especially like in the whole flat earth thing, let's say that there's this firmament and this dome, and that we're in here, right? Just as the Hebrew cosmology shows. Well, you have people like Matt Boylan and people who follow him who are like, sounds like a prison. I don't want to be there. That's the Luciferian edge. I'm not saying that math is, but actually I do have concerns. He does seem like a Freemason. But that's on a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But that's that Luciferian urge, is to say, no. That's a dictator, and there's, I don't know if you've heard the idea of the demiurge, or like they're the archons are basically the like the wardens of this prison, and we're here to be slaves and servants in that. And I think that that's a distorted view. It's a very superficial understanding of what it means to have a creator. Like, it can be a very liberating, beautiful thing, even if it is a closed cosmology. Well, hell, we were put here in a special regard, given all this, to enjoy and to experience and to grow as a creature. Like, how could you look at that as a bad thing? Maybe we're being protected from something absolutely wretched outside of that. So, like the containment of the human spirit, so to speak, but in a good regard, like to protect it from something crazy we can't even comprehend.
Right.
So, I that's where I go with all this, and I deal with these atheists every day because I'm doing these debate channels and all of that, and there's this place called Debate Coliseum. It's a bunch of atheists.
Okay.
Well, they filled them in to all of these flat Earth debates. So, like 2 weeks ago, we got infiltrated by a bunch of atheists. It's so frustrating speaking to these folks because they think they know everything, actually.
Right. And they,
Sorry, yeah.
Because it's humbling to think they didn't, and they can't go there.
Mm-hmm. So it's just, it's interesting. Like, this topic is very valuable, flat Earth, because it brings you down these paths, and look, I'm having this conversation with you, who technically is a stranger, Like, these are the conversations I seek in this world, yet you can't have with the people around you most of the time.
Right.
People are so locked into the matrix. Television, programming, go to work, come home, watch your programming, go to sleep. Nobody cares. The damage has been done on this. Like Philbach said, this is one of the worst cultures, if you want to call it a culture. Like, this is just a control mechanism.
Yeah, that's a good question, and whether you can even call it a culture anymore. It changes from one day to the next, practically, and one show to the next.
It's a culture of evasion. That's the way that I see it.
Or denial.
Everybody wants to be entertained.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be entertained, and perpetually. That's called evasion. They're avoiding, like, my folks. They're great people, but they are part of that TV generation, however you want to put it. And that's all they do. From the moment they wake up, it's 8 a.m. until 12 at night. They have it on. And it runs their life. They believe what the TV tells them, that whatever they see on the news is real. And this is the majority of people. And we get called conspiracy theorists because we have critical thinking. So it seems like researchers and critical thinkers are...
That's another one of those upside-down things,
Oh, that Luciferian inversion principle.
Yeah.
That's everywhere. Like, just to go to diet real quick, like, they tell you that fat is the deadliest thing you can put in your body. It's terrible. It kills you. It's horrible, right? They tell you that carbohydrates are great. Your body runs off of glucose. Eat a bunch of carbs. Well, that's an inversion. Fat is actually the healthiest thing you can put in your body. Right fats. I'm not saying, like, but it is the healthiest thing you can put in your body. And carbs are carbs without fiber. We'll say, I forgot the
simple
word.
Carbs.
The simple carbs. That's literally poison. Your body jettisons it through the same metabolic processes as it does alcohol and other poisons. So, and it rots your teeth. Why would you put anything in your mouth that would rot your teeth and spike your insulin and make you store fat as it's being ejected violently?
I still like ice cream.
Well, they make no sugar added stuff, and like, there's always ways.
I don't want to hear that.
No, it's good. Actually, I'll eat a whole carton of it. But what happened was, when I realized this paradigm, this is another Luciferian inversion. This is population control. It's eugenics. They came out in '78 and they used a doctor named Ansel Keys to put it down that fat is killing people because of heart disease. They had a huge spike in heart disease. And they gave everybody the wrong information. This is that whole low-fat craze that came from the '80s and '90s. It's poison. Why do you think we have so many Alzheimer's, dementia, type 2 diabetes, obesity, neurological problems popping up left and right, with all these different diseases? It comes from not giving your body fat, and it comes from abusing your body with carbohydrate.
Right.
And it's so dark. It's so dark. I lost that weight in 8 months. Not even kidding. I lost 40 pounds in the first month.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's such an easy thing, but it requires a paradigm shift. You have to realize that everything you were told about the way your body works is wrong. You need to go back and understand what the mechanisms are, and when you do, you can play into those mechanisms. Like, that's it. It's just about hormone control, leptin, insulin, glucagon, and ghrelin. If you know how to play into it by the way you eat, you can do whatever you want with your body. I can gain 20 pounds in a week if I want. I can lose 20 pounds in 2. It's just that simple. So that's another paradigm thing that they flipped on us. I believe the Luciferian inversion is everywhere. They've done it through all of the theoretical sciences. They've done it through the medical industry for this. I think what they do is they take the truth or God's word or biblical word or whatever, and they invert it, because if you end up believing it, then they have control. They have control of the people who believe it.
Absolutely. That's it's like another thing Orwell said about you controlling the language, you control thought. And they have, even with text speak and all that sort of thing, how people abbreviate everything, that they can't think beyond that after a while,
140 characters.
Yep. Yep.
So you've mentioned Orwell a couple times. Have you gone back and reread it since, like, Flat Earth stuff?
I've read it not since Flat Earth, but it's still pretty fresh in my mind as far as, I have it on my shelf here. I have Animal Farm.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I've read that a couple times. And
well, at the chapter 3, I found just a quick verse. Let me read it to you. I'm sure you're aware of it, but I find it really amazing concerning astronomy and what our cosmology is. So this is where O'Brien is talking to the main character, and the main character says, "But the whole universe is outside us. Look at the stars. Some of them are millions of light years away. They're all out of our reach forever." He's talking about he controls matter. And he says, "What are the stars?" O'Brien said it differently. "They are bits of fire a few kilometers away. We could reach them if we wanted to, or we could blot them out. The Earth is the center of the universe. The sun and the stars move around it." Winston made another convulsive movement. This time he did not say anything. O'Brien continued as though answering a spoken objection. "For certain purposes, of course, this is not true. When we navigate the ocean, or when we predict an eclipse, we often find it convenient to assume that the Earth goes around the sun and that the stars are millions upon millions of kilometers away. But what of it? Do you suppose it is not beyond our mathematicians to create a dual system of astronomy? The stars can be near or distant according to how we need them. Do you suppose our mathematicians are unequal to that? Have you forgotten doublethink?"
Mm-hmm.
When I saw that,
yeah,
and saw how Orwell died 6 months after the publication of that book,
right,
it really made me wonder. I'll tell you what, because he was rubbing shoulders with Bernays. He was rubbing shoulders with that whole crowd, with Aldous Huxley, and he was part of the elite of the time. Dinner parties and associations, he was very well involved. So I think that he was revealing something there.
Oh, they always are. It's just a question of whether they went too far. It's like with Bruce Lee revealing some of the secrets of Chinese martial arts, and then he's killed. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting. This place seems like a place that we're supposed to, like, we're all birthed into this deception. We have no idea what it is. We can only go by what our elders tell us and what society kind of puts up for us. But it is far more complex and far more beautiful than anybody can tell us, and I think it's up to us to figure that out. That's why I
Right.
love flat Earth, because it puts a person on the path to ask the right
And
questions.
that's the thing is you be judged on the basis of what you do with what you were given, and we're here to not just be tested, but also to be grown, not as in a lab rat, but as in we're in an environment in which our spirits can grow. And
Yes.
some people don't get good soil, you know, it's not their fault,
Yeah.
and God will take that into account. But what you do with what you're given is what the whole thing is about. And like I said, it's back to trust again. You have to trust that God will do, you know, make things turn out the best way they could turn out. And this philosophically gets into possible worlds and middle knowledge and all that sort of thing. And what I choose to believe is that this scenario is the one with the best outcome. And I trust him for that. And eventually you got to trust somebody or something.
Yeah, I agree. Beautifully spoken. So yeah, this has been my direction with things over the past year, and I'm grateful because these are not the things I was thinking about. We'll put it that way. I've read more books in the past year than I had in the past previous 5. You
That's
know, I've
awesome.
learned more,
Yeah.
and that's why I try to defend this topic as much as I do. Um, and it goes with all these other ones too. Like I think it just brings people back to the idea of a creator. I think people
Right.
can put it on the table, and again, because everything that this media and this society pushes is to push us away from that notion. It's everywhere.
Right. Yeah. It's just a great big mystery, but you know we can't expect that we're going to solve it all, and that's not the point. The point is how we lived, how we dealt with whatever hand we were given, and what kind of people we wound up being ultimately, and
Yeah,
that's our
I agree.
choice. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Hey, Brian is
So,
back. I wonder where if Pillbox will get back. There's been busyness in the chat.
How's it
oh, we
going,
lost Bill
guys?
Box.
All right,
Oh, hey there, Brian.
what you been doing?
I see the hanging out with Dad for a little bit.
Oh, is everything okay, or sort of, or shouldn't?
Oh yeah, no, everything's cool. Just went down there to make sure everything was good. You know how it goes.
Okay, that's good.
Oh, I also wanted to address the book that I'm reading currently, The World Beyond the Poles. I don't know if you've looked into it. Victoria had been looking into it, and she had found like some occultic links to the book. It said that the man like used ESP to come up with the idea. Then he went out and searched for it. Well, I'm about 5 chapters in. I've got it on my channel where I'm doing a live reading on a Hangout, and hopefully I can have it all done this week. But I just wanted to address it in the second chapter. He does talk about how he was out in the woods, and the idea came to him in a divine way of this cosmology that he's putting forth in this book. And that to me was very suspect because it was just an idea he had that came to him, and then he goes on this mission, and he was in a position to do financially and with his connections. He was working with Hearst and all these great explorers at the time. He had access. He was a banker's son. His father created Bank of America. So then you have that whole banker issue that this could be complete,
Mm-hmm.
this info. But the book is extremely rare, and it's very interesting. The copies of them are $500, and
Wow.
a couple. Yeah, it's like very hard to get. A couple people have been putting together like hodgepodge versions of it, and I finally was able to get a copy last week. That's why I started to do the live reading. It's out there. It points to, from my best understanding, a concave universe system, not like concave Earth like LSC's pointing to, but that the ends of the Earth that we think in the North Pole and the South Pole are not. They keep going, but up is relative, and you begin to go, I guess, along a wall. I don't know, it's kind of hard to put the way he explains it, but you move into the celestial, and there's another Earth, so to speak, above us.
Hmm.
So
Um,
yeah, it's interesting. The guy claims it's nonfiction, and apparently he was out there in Antarctica, but that could be complete disinfo, at the time to muddy the waters. So I just want to let Vix know I'm definitely having high discernment, and I'm not going around saying this thing has any truth in it. I just want to read it and see what folks think about.
yeah, that's it. Doesn't hurt to read stuff, and it doesn't hurt to think maybe look at the idea that a mountain is a tree. But there again, it always comes back to how you make your decisions on what to accept and what not to accept, and if you're uh, have determined what your method is and you stick to it, I don't have a problem with if you reach different conclusions than I will that using a different measuring stick, and
Absolutely.
then you can be open to new ideas without necessarily having to accept them. You can explore them. I mean, that's how I started getting into flat Earth. I'm like, I'm going to give it a fair shot. I'm going to dive into it and find out what's going on in here, and still ask critical questions as I go along because I have a certain way I look at the world and how I determine true from false. And so,
Absolutely.
it was not a big deal to me because, like I've said before, that us young Earth creationists are used to that sort of thing where we're on the other side of the majority. We're very much shunned and thought to be stupid because we believe that the Earth is much younger than the scientists tell us,
Yeah.
and that so the idea that the Earth might not be the shape or position that they say was not in a big leap for me at all. But it mattered what the facts were, and that's the bottom line in everything. And how do you determine true from false? So
And it's such a huge paradigm shift. I commend you for being able to even ask the question because that's where the cognitive dissonance comes in. And
right,
people are very, 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 like it triggers them in a way. And this is why you see the globalists being so vitriolic and angry and so abusive. It's because it's your entire worldview. And if it's wrong and all your premises are based off of it, if, like if tomorrow on the BBC and CNN they came out and said the Earth was flat, there'd be a lot of problems.
right.
Like because the authority would say it, and then sure people would accept it. Tons of people would, but there'd be suicides and like it's a
Wow,
heavy
yeah,
thing. It's a really heavy thing, and that's why I think they may be just leaking it like this. Kind of putting it out there and pushing it a certain way and seeing how people respond to it. Because I definitely think that it's very different from what they're telling us. Those pictures of Earth, it's not. It doesn't look like that in my view. And
right,
I don't think they can get higher than 500 miles.
right. And they can't
That's
even
more.
get their pictures consistent.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I think 500 miles is the limit for humans or creatures to go up. If you notice, since the moon missions, they haven't gone higher than 450, 500 miles
Yeah.
on every one of their missions. And people want to say, oh, well, it's the Van Allen radiation belt. I think it might be an energetic barrier. Like, apparently, the Russians, when they were sending dogs and monkeys up that high, they were coming back soup, like
Mm.
completely, like molecularly destroyed
Wow.
in like a really twisted, dark way. So, like, I don't think they've gone more, and that means there's a barrier. That's why they sent a bunch of nukes up there, and was it Fishbowl and Dominic?
Yeah,
You
Operation
know,
Fishbowl. Yeah.
yeah, they were testing that barrier, and I think that they went up there, found that it wasn't what we've been saying for 450 years, and they put the Satanist Jack Parsons with 17 Nazis to head NASA to push the lie to that final point.
Yep.
That's what I think. That's my theory
Yep.
on it.
Yeah, and theories, are valid if you can at least kind of have some kind of rationale for them, as opposed to just believing something because you want to. Like if you pray to a crystal, something good will happen, and
Yeah, just believing that
just
these
believe it.
mountains are trees or
Yeah.
something.
It's
Yeah,
funny, it's just ironic again how easily people will just believe something like that, but no, there's no God.
right? Interesting. So I think this is a big experiment. all this flat earth stuff, and especially this trees thing, I think it's an experiment. They're testing how far people go with ideas.
Right.
But
Yeah.
who knows?
I mean, what else could it be when, if you look at it, is whatever consistent rule of thumb you go by. Any way you look at it, it's like, you know what? There should be red flags from in everybody's mind at some point, I would think.
Yeah, I'd hope.
I'd like to believe that, but apparently, that isn't the case. There's a lot of people that don't have any red flags at all.
Yeah, but that's humanity, 80% of folks will tend to believe things without understanding why they believe it. And that goes for the globalists too. You ask
Right.
the globalists how fast they're spinning or what direction they're going around the sun and all this. They have no idea. They have no idea why they believe what they do.
Right, it's a house of cards. It really is.
It really is. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at with everything. I'm just trying to be guarded and discerning more, especially with this new topic coming up.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they try next, because they're going to try to be sneakier.
Right.
I hope. Of course, that I don't know, because with NASA fakery in Hollywood and all that, it's like they're getting sloppier.
Yeah,
they're not
they'd be
trying
getting
to
better at it.
Yeah.
It's almost like they want people to find out. Like they're probably beating their head on the table, going, "Oh my God, how come we're not getting called out more?"
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like like the Pluto thing, and it's 3.4 billion miles away. Pluto is.
Right.
And they sent back this detailed video of the terrain. Like the satellite sweeping over it, and these things are just, even Carl Sagan said it himself. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Yeah, only don't apply that to me.
No, do not apply it to astronomy. And it's really interesting. And I found there's a quote in Copernicus on the revolution of spheres that the globalists don't like it when I bring it up. But let me bring this up real quick. It's very short. 1 second. So, let no man, so far as hypotheses are concerned, expect anything certain from astronomy, since that science can afford nothing of the kind. The hypothesis of the terrestrial motion of the Earth was nothing more than a hypothesis, valuable only so far as it explains phenomena, and not to be considered with reference to absolute truth.
Right, exactly.
Page 8 on the revolution of the spheres.
Yeah.
And when I asked the globalists about this, they're like, "Oh, he was an idiot. He was just an idiot back then. It was 500 years ago. We found different." And even a couple of them were like, "But yeah, and he was just wrong." It's just so frustrating, because if you look at the history of astronomy and understand why light years came about and why heliocentric is here and not geocentric.
Right.
Even Hubble said both the geocentric and heliocentric coordinate systems work just fine. It's only a matter of philosophical reasons that they choose their coordinate system.
Right.
That's in Hubble's book. And I just wish people would dare to take a look at that,
Well, that's the thing. They don't understand the difference between theory and reality. Any theory can work. It's a theory. I could have any theory about anything, and if it's beyond our means of testing, you can't tell me I'm wrong. That's why they've been getting away with pseudoscience for hundreds of years, because they started coming up with ways to pretend they know otherwise than what our eyes are telling us. Well, actually, it could be this. That's everything it's ever been in the world of science about theories of, or it could be something else. It might be different, or it has to be, or it must. These are the words still used in the textbooks today. I have evolution books, geological books, a few space books that are really interesting. All of them use these terms must, or have to, or
if.
Or if. Or maybe, or we will have evidence for this someday. So that's literally what all these science books are saying. It's not real science. The word science has changed. It's been perverted. It no longer means observable reality or known facts. It means presuppositions. Whatever you want to believe, you can say it's science, and it's whatever you want to presuppose. They've changed everything. Look at this guy in the chat. What's this guy's name talking about? Why would the flat Earth matter? Why does anything? Does it matter when you go to the store and you get your change back and you give them a $20 bill and you bought $15 worth of items? Does it matter if you get $1 back or $5? I guarantee you when you're at the store,
It matters.
I guarantee, Brian, I guarantee when they're at the store, when they go to the dollar store and they scrounge around and find $12, because you know most of these people don't have a job anyway, and they're scrounging off their parents. When they go to the dollar store to buy, their toilet paper, I bet they want their change back, don't they? They want their change back, but then they come here, well, what is the flat earth? No, the flat earth doesn't matter. All that matters is your correct change when you go to the store to make sure you don't lose what's important to you, which is money. That's what's important to you, because the flat earth isn't important. Money's important. I can already see it from here. It's a psycho. These people are just coming out of the woodworks. These people cannot think for themselves. What do you mean, what does truth matter? You're asking me, why does truth matter? Are you psychotic? I mean, yeah. I can tell so I guess, well, stay away from anybody, because anytime you're talking to anybody, you've just admitted that you're a liar. All you're going to do is lie then. If this doesn't matter, then you're a liar. It's that simple.
Well, here's something that's interesting. This guy's pointing out. The Illuminati created the flat earth and the round earth debate. So you guys are so naive to search and see what started. It was the elites. They are distracting you from what is about to happen to fight over nothing. So this guy says.
No, I'm sorry to say it, but he's being a bitch boy. That's what and you don't have the courage to start thinking for yourself. If you're so worried about a paradigm and it's not important to you, it's not even important to you if this could be true, you've already taken yourself out of the argument. Your claim just now was, what does it matter? So
why
you
is he
have
in
no
here?
say so. It doesn't matter because you proved it doesn't matter. You already asked, why does truth matter? You no longer have a say so. And by the way,
here's what I say about that.
Romans 8:28. Hold on. Romans 8:28 says all things will work together for good. That means God's in control over everything. Stop professing yourself to be wise and stop pretending you know things. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't matter who put the information out. This is a conversation you have to have with yourself. You need to ask yourself, am I moving, or is it those things that are moving? Let's take the institutions off the table and let's find out myself. So it doesn't matter who put this idea out there, okay? It's not a distraction. To know the truth is the most important, because it'll help you with your discernment of the other issues that may come. So this is such a naive approach, and it's funny he's projecting that on people who research flat earth.
Well, that's the same old thing of people presuming that if somebody disagrees on a topic, that there's something wrong with that person, and they presume their motives or their causes of why they disagree because they can't imagine a legitimate disagreement. And I think that's one of the core causes or roots, if you will, of a lot of dissent and negativity and division that goes on, because people they don't know how to disagree and how to take disagreement. It's a threat to them or something.
They're only doing they're separating it separates the wheat from the chaff. There are going to be people coming in the name of Jesus Christ that are willing to be honest and say, you know what? Jesus told me I'm not supposed to make a claim about something until I've actually looked into the subject, which we know if we had or not. Every single one of us isn't stupid enough to not be sure if I've looked into this before. You know what, Brian, let me look. You know what, Brian, I'm not sure about this. Have I thought about this before? No, I don't think we do that. We know immediately if we have delved into a topic to research it, to figure out the truth or not. We're not that stupid, even though some of you people act this way. The problem is that you've already claimed what does truth matter, so you've already destroyed your own credibility. You've removed yourself from a cognitive discussion of any sort of intelligence. You've just claimed what does truth matter. You're the last person I'm going to try to help, period.
Hey guys,
I
got to mute.
Truth and,
go
on.
Sorry, I got to mute for just a few minutes. I'll be right back. Okay?
Oh, no problem.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, truth is directly connected to the divine. If you love truth, then you love God. If you love God, you love the truth. I mean, and there's no other way of putting it in my eyes. Truth absolutely matters, no matter what the consequences for knowing that truth is. That's the reason I'm here. I'm pursuing it at the highest level that I possibly can. And I don't care where it leads me. Like, I really don't. If it turned out Lord Stephen Christ was right, and he was only put there to kind of sway people from, looking into it, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's the case. But I'm saying I don't even care. I would say, oh, well, here's the proof. Here's the evidence. This is what it is. Well, whatever. So I don't have an agenda in my truth searching. And a lot of people have these filters and these agendas, and they get stuck at certain points. like this gentleman is. He's in a paradigm that has been conscripted to him that he is unaware of when it comes to heliocentricity. He just thinks the Earth is round and that this is a ridiculous topic. But if he were to draw back and understand things from first premises, he'd realize that there is some problems with the heliocentric model. It's just that simple.
Oh, yeah, it's also so simple. He's already removed himself from the conversation, though. If I meet somebody, and I guarantee on the street these people are going to act very different. If Brian and you and I were standing here on the street corner with a big flat earth sign, and you're going to walk up to us, I guarantee you're going to approach a little bit different. First of all, that's the biggest problem, is that you are not acting how you would act in reality. You are pretending because you're hiding behind your computer. That's the first thing that we're going to know automatically. So why am I going to take you serious? Brian doesn't approach people that way. I mean, you know, I've never heard him do it. Why doesn't he do that? Why doesn't Agave do that to people? Or, you know, I'm sorry, that's not the way you behave anyway. 90% of these people are so fake, and I'm sorry that there's just a large majority of people around here that have lied, and they've made mistakes. They can't admit they're wrong. You know what? That's what it is. You just got to say sometimes, you know what? I might have been wrong, and like Cathesis says, it's absolutely an internal thing. We've always known that. It has nothing to do with evidence. But when we're speaking about a subject like this, you got to realize, and it's harder for a lot of people, not for you, Cathesis, obviously, as far as your upbringing being a Seventh-day Adventist, which I actually greatly admire those people in a lot of different ways, and I absolutely love those people, including Baptists. There are some religious groups out there that I've met personally because of my biased experience that I do love a lot of those people. There are some great, just like I've met good people from different faiths before, but I definitely like Seventh-day Adventists. So you do have an advantage, though, because you were taught things for a long time out of the Bible. Yeah. That's the thing you're noticing. People that don't know the Bible, people that are ignoring the Bible are the ones falling for these things, are the people pretending they know the Bible are the ones falling for these things. So, of course, the deniers of the Bible. There's so many different ways to be wrong. It comes in both fashions, and it's the white horse and the black horse. You know, it's not like all of the people that are going to lie to you come in the same uniform. We've been lied to by our friends, our family, our leaders, right. Our teachers, our politicians, our police officers. The higher you go, the worse the crime continues, the bigger the crime. You know, it's the guy in the street selling a bag of weed, which is the most innocent, and he has to go to jail. You know, he's going to go to jail. But the cop that murders somebody, the judge that covers up a crime and commits crime to protect, no, they get away scot-free. It's the bankers ruined everything. They blew billions. What do? Unlike your credit report, when you miss a payment, you know, because you're living paycheck to paycheck, you lose all credibility. They ruin your credit, and you can't buy anything anymore. But, of course, if you're the rich banks, they give you the rest of the money when you mess up. If you're not awake to the fact that, yes, they've lied to you about everything, what else do you not know? What else could you be wrong about?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You have to humble yourself, and that's why it greatly affects ego, because people are egoically attached to their worldview and what they think they know, and you start pulling that apart, and people have, like, cognitive dissonance is a very, very real phenomenon. It's actually that triggered me to go into this. When I remember I went and visited my folks, and my dad was in the Navy 20 years. And I was like, yeah, there's some people on the internet talking about, you know, the Earth might be flat. You know, so I'm looking into it. And he got triggered. He was like, that is absurd. I circumnavigated the globe. You've gone too far with this shit. I know you like conspiracy theory stuff, but this is just too far. And I was like, what the hell? Like, he really had a very negative response to just 2 words, flat Earth. And I realized that I had as well leading up to that moment. Like, I was mocking them. I was making fun of it. And so when I realized that was something that was happening with me, that the cognitive dissonance was real, that's when I buckled down and tried to approach it by putting my ego aside and trying to understand this alternative cosmology. Like, what are these people saying, and why are they saying it?
Right. You're asking the foundational questions, the ones that are the base questions that determine everything else you're going to ask. Yeah.
It's an interesting topic.
Yeah, and as we went along, we kept coming back to that. Drop your ego, and you have to be able to trust at some point. Everybody has faith at some point, and how you make your decisions, you know, you got to have a way of making decisions and not just ping around from one idea to the next. We just keeps going around and around to that.
Well, and also don't realize this is a really extravagant game. This is so don't misinterpret also for us people that are not going to buy into the bullshit. We understand the general facts, and we're Christian or agnostic or even atheist. There's a large group of people that know a general idea of a lot of things and aren't falling for a lot of BS. That's just the way it is. You're going to either know or you're not. But realize this is that the cannon fodder and the social suicide attempts that we see of people just going absolute bananas and ape shit and losing their minds are actually evidence. That's what you realize, that since it's a spiritual warfare, that's actually the strongest form of evidence is when you get filthy backlash, no matter if it's from somebody who's supposed to be your friend or an enemy or a hater. That's all evidence, especially when they're friends of yours and then they treat you in such a manner to attack you because you said those two words, cathexis, because you said FE, and oh my God, no, I'm just too smart. All he's saying is I'm too smart. I'm too smart. I'm too smart. Why would you say that? Are you stupid? Yeah. That's all he's saying is I'm too smart. I'm too smart. That's exactly what he's saying. You can read between the lines, and that's just evidence. Why would you flip out about that? Because I know you haven't looked into this.
Yeah. Why would two words? Why would two words trigger somebody so much? And it seems that this, a lot of people lack the imagination to know why this matters. They really do. And I think that it's actually easy to boil down. The Big Bang cosmology is the axiom to a certain set of beliefs. It's this belief that there is no creator, that everything was done by natural processes, and it puts you into a category where you will eventually it will lead you to atheism or secularism, and it'll lead you, especially if you're more intellectually honest with yourself, it'll lead you to nihilism. And that is the perfect philosophical framework to give to a controlled population, to give to a slave population. And that's why I think it matters. Because if it's not true, and you recognize that they have done this to a group of people, you included, then wouldn't you want to know what is true and to reverse that course and to be empowered by a different philosophy? And that's the way that I see it now, and I feel sad for the people who can't see that or accept that that's a possibility. I've got family members who literally think I'm crazy for asking these questions, and they can't see why it's relevant. They keep saying, why would they do this? This doesn't make sense. Why would, there's a group of people who go to this length? Because of control. This will control a population to a certain degree. They're not going to realize how powerful they really are with these other notions of God and creator. You're empowered to know that you are created on this creation to create for the creator. Otherwise, you think you're just, insignificant dust on an insignificant planet in an insignificant galaxy in this infinite vast universe that you can't even get your head around. It's all fiction, science fiction.
Right, and what you were saying about reactions is really telling about a lot of things. How people react to an idea tells you a lot about them and where they are. It doesn't mean they can't ever change or anything, but it really, and when everybody reacts the same, with revulsion at an idea, it's something you want to look into. It's like the same thing with the Bible. It's like, like I said, they don't have any problem asking a crystal for help, but boy, you can't say anything about God or Jesus or anything like that. That's just threatening to them, and that's how they react.
Well, actually, that's a great point, and what I wanted to get into earlier about, of course, the no force and the flat Earth scam. Realize this is that they're literally making all these ties with things that are biblical, and they're not mentioning it, and they're ignoring the Bible. They're completely ignoring the Bible, right. Most of which, 95% that I've found, I'm not saying all, and I'm sure there's some I haven't seen, but this is clearly what is very empirical, is that they're absolutely ignoring the Bible and saying, look at this, and this is a new thing, and I felt so good, and it made me feel a certain way, and by the way, there's giants, and there's giants, and there's then they go right back to the biblical stuff. They go up in the sky, they float around in a fairy tale of tree mountains, and then they come back down and say, giants were probably real now, and large animals and big trees. Yes, just like the Bible described. So you went all the way up to the sky, came back down to earth, and here you are mentioning all this stuff in the Bible without saying the Bible and just trying to act like you found something.
Right. I believe this now, but not because of what you said. It's the ego thing again.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just an interesting topic. I mean, what does it hurt? What does it
Right.
hurt to ask yourself these questions? That's what I find the most ridiculous. That
Right. And it's not like we're mocking the idea that mountains could be trees. We're mocking, not mocking, but really strongly questioning how easily people would accept an idea without really investigating it, or even being skeptical like they are with everything else.
Yeah,
That's
and I
the,
was saying that though about flat Earth though. Like what does it
oh
hurt to
yeah,
ask yourself these questions? But no, that
right.
applies to the whole tree thing too. It's fine to imagine this stuff and like to understand it, from the way that the person's trying to say, but critical mind, you've got to go out and test the world around you. How in the hell am I going to test for silicon life forms and uh, so yeah, that topic's a bit frustrating for me. But flat Earth, people need to look into it and ask themselves these questions.
Right. Yeah. Do you think we're at a good stopping point, or do you want to keep going? If
Yeah,
so, I'm going to
actually.
need a little
Yeah,
Oh
that's
break
yeah,
here
fine.
for
yeah. I
supper.
was gonna get dinner here
That's
real
cool.
soon, so yeah, I think
Okay.
that'd be just fine.
I was gonna
Okay.
start one up and actually let Joel come in and tell us how smart he was. Sorry.
Okay. Well, what do you want to do? You want to keep this one going and just, there's no real way to pause it. Somebody has to keep talking, or we could start, like Brian's
Yes.
offering to start another one, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, I'll
It's up to
start
you
one
guys.
unless anybody else has any other ideas.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that way you can finish this one up, and then we
All
can
right,
get.
just give me a
Okay.
second. Give me about a minute. Let me start it, and then I'll put it in the chat on YouTube.
Yeah, because I've got
Okay.
some
Your
work to
guys'
do, and I was
first, but
gonna
you know
get
what I mean.
dinner and such. So
Right. Yeah, we're all in different time zones, but the problem is that in my time zone, it's supper time.
yeah, same here. Yeah, I'm gonna get some food. No, I really appreciate you having me on and having this conversation. I talked to you a couple months ago, and I've talked to you guys in passing, here and there, and I'm really happy to have this conversation today.
Thanks, and I'm really glad you could come. You really helped make it interesting. It does matter who's on the panel, not because of elitism or something like that, but just people have interesting perspectives, and sometimes it just clicks. A group of people will click and have a really good conversation. So I'm really happy you guys showed up today. So,
Absolutely, I appreciate it. All right, well, you guys have a good one.
Minutes,
Thanks so
all
man.
much.
right,
Be
you
blessed,
too.
folks.
Thanks
Later,
everybody in
man.
the chat too.
Bye, guys.
All right.